Pleasant good afternoon to everybody out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll, the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And it is an impromptu mailbag day on a Tuesday because we thought, you know what? Why not? Let's go after it.
We got some things in the works that are taking up my time.
You're right.
That make it harder for me to plan shows out and do all the research to do a show. We were going to do a schedule breakdown, and I promise you, if things go well with what I'm working on, it's going to be worth it, and you all are going to be excited. So we figured, you know what? Instead of not canceling the show, which is what I first thought about doing, you know what? Let's do a mailbag, because that we can always do, and we'll let you all. Right, we'll let you all do all the show prep and let you all figure out what you guys want to talk about.
There's some really good questions in the queue.
Yes, but that's the thing, Vince, too, for me is like my tendency's been to cancel lately when we're just slammed and those things. But I'm like, man, the questions have been so great. And they've always been good, but they've been so great lately that they sparked so much great discussion. Yeah, that I was like, you know what, let's do a mailbag. So. No doubt. We had to finish up some business conversations. That's why we're a little bit late. We apologize, but Vince, I am ready to go.
Yes,
I am ready to go.
Yeah, and I will say I apologize for us being a little late today. We had a little impromptu staff meeting, and again, good things in the works. So
hopefully we'll find out later tonight.
Good point. That's a good point. It has nothing to do with me winning or losing my baseball game tonight.
Yes, 14-1 yesterday. By the way,
14-1. So we'll take a victory anyway.
Vince is in a pretty good mood.
All right. I'm going to throw this one up there. I'm hoping you can handle this one. Blaine says, hey, mailbag day and first question. For the history guys, who would win one-on-one, Battleship Yamato or Iowa?
You know, that is a really interesting question. So, I mean, I assume he's talking about a one-on-one just between those two ships, not the entire task force around them, because as we saw – with the Yamato and the Musashi is because by that time, the American carrier fleet was so superior to what the Japanese carrier fleet was, which was decimated, that there was just no air cover for the Yamato and the Musashi. So the Americans were able to sink it with their carriers, basically. You know, that's a good question. You know, the interesting thing about the Yamato is they basically made it to be protected from other battleships. It had insanely thick armor. Definitely thicker armor than the Iowa, but the Iowa was a significantly faster ship. It was like 33, 34 knots, whereas the Yamato was like 27 knots. So I just think the fact that you know, my gut is that it would be the Iowa. But I mean, the Yamato, the thing about, like, if you look at the Yamato and the Musashi, which was the sister ship, to sink it, I mean, the amount of bombs they had to drop on Musashi to sink it was insane. I mean, it lived up to what it was built to do, which is take a ton of punishment. But because it had no air cover, you know, they were able to eventually sink it. But good Lord, if you ever do like any research, there's tons of really cool YouTube videos on this where they talk about the sinking of the Yamato and the sister ship, the Musashi, and just the punishment that they took. So, you know, part of me says the Iowa was a little faster, a little bit more maneuverable, but man, the Iowa would have had to plant so many shots on Yamato to sink it. It wasn't going to be like when the Bismarck sank the Hood, right? Where it just got like that one perfect shot right in the middle and blew the sucker up. That was a heavy cruiser, basically, not necessarily a battleship, although they fought it like a battleship. So I would lean towards the Iowa, but the Yamato was a powerful ship that could take a ton of punishment. If you look at the entire a battle between the two battleship fleets, it would still like we saw it turn out, it would be the Americans, because even if you took out the carrier aspect, the Americans had so many ships by that point in time. I mean, the industrial power of the United States just completely wiped Japan out, right? And so even if you took the you know, because Japan was able to build like the three super carriers, right? There's the Yamato, the Musashi, and I forget the other third one. But I mean, the Americans could produce 10, 12.
Right.
And they just couldn't, when a ship went down, they couldn't build it fast enough to replace it. And that's why one of the reasons the Americans were able to win. And they created better fighter planes. So the Zeros kind of won the early battles, but you know, the Americans quickly got better planes up there, and obviously had better pilots and weren't killing their pilots off with kamikaze, you know, flights and stuff like that. So I would lean towards the Iowa, but I think it'd be a very interesting. I always kind of lean towards the faster ship, unless the faster ship is supremely under armored, like the Hood was when it got sunk by the Bismarck, which was the Hood was a British ship. And the Bismarck was obviously a German ship, but blew it up like literally basically like one shot and just hit it right in the middle and just blew it up, split it in half, and it sunk in seconds. But it was an incredibly lightly armored ship. So I don't think the Iowa would have had similar problems. But what a great way to start the show with the history question.
Love that.
I'd be curious kind of your opinion on that.
Well, no, Blaine. I mean, pretty much.
I mean, Blaine's opinion on that. I'd like to hear what Blaine has to say.
Absolutely.
You made it seem like you weren't really like,
well, let's just say I've been a PE teacher too long. But I think Blaine put his comment down there at the bottom.
Okay.
His opinion. But,
okay. Shinano. No, the Shinano was a carrier. I thought it was like the ISE is, I think, the name of it. The Shinano was the carrier that got sunk basically because they had an earthquake when they were building it, and it kind of it had some issues, and then it got sunk pretty quickly. So I thought the Shinano was he said turned it into a carrier. There was one other though. I think it was like I think the name of it was the ISE, I believe. So but somebody else asked, how about the Bismarck versus the Yamato? Yamato would have taken that one. The Yamato was the thing is like, if you look at like the Bismarck was an older ship, right? Like the Bismarck was made, Yamato was made kind of during World War II. The Bismarck was made before, and Yamato was to me a better ship, a more advanced ship, and a little bit more powerful ship. But I mean, yeah. It's interesting. But yeah, the Bismarck got sunk pretty quickly after it blew up the Hood, because the British were just like, okay, we have nothing else that we care about with our Navy except sinking the Bismarck. and they did. So, yeah.
All right, hard left turn here. Zach Martin says, in your best Uncle Rico voice, I could throw a baseball the length of the football field. Brian, how far could you throw a football in your heyday?
I mean, normally 50 to 55 yards on a good day, 60. You know, like my problem was I have smaller hands, so I could throw really hard from like 25 in, but to really get like the length is, when the ball's going to come out of your hand sooner, that's when having smaller hands affected me a little bit. But yeah, it's probably 50 to 55 on it. And I'm talking like in a game. Not like just standing there and practice, like launching a ball with no shoulder pads on.
Right. Like a punt, pass, and kick competition.
Yeah.
This is a fun one. Zach also asks, who was the best player you coached and who was the real best player you coached? I'm not sure the difference in those. But, you think you're going to lie to him or something?
Well, the best player I ever coached was a kid. I mean, it's just like take away division. I mean, because I coached, one to blade. The best player I ever coached was a kid named Michael Warfield, who was a wide receiver at Duquesne, and he was an excellent player. He actually came into the season, only had like 13 career catches. He was a junior coming into the season. The year before I got there, they had a receiver that was ended up getting invited to the Colt or the Steelers camp, and he was like 6'2", 220, and caught 70 passes for over 1,000 yards. And they had two other kids that came back that caught a lot of passes, Yarden Brantley and Randy Volakovich. Yarden was my fast guy. He ran a 4.41, I think it was what it was for the Eagles, so they signed him to minicamp as well. But Yarden was my speed guy. Randy was my possession guy, but Michael was our dude. I mean, I'm trying to think. It's off the top of my head. I think he had like 51 catches for like 1,140 yards, 14 touchdowns in 11 games. And we played Monmouth in the basically the national championship. It was like the mid-major national title game. It was a bowl. It's like the ECAC Classic was a bowl game. And we beat them. Michael had a big touchdown in that game. We beat him 13-10. He had like a 50-plus yard touchdown in that game to win us the game. And the receiver on the other team, the best receiver on the other team was Miles Austin, who played for the Cowboys for a while. But Michael was the best player in the field that day. And he actually got an invite with the Bengals, played a little bit in NFL Europe, but he was a tremendous player. The interesting thing about him, when I've talked in the past, Vince, about the kid that I had that just wasn't a great practice player because he just couldn't get loose, that's Michael.
Right.
He was super tightly wound, like physically super tightly wound, and he just couldn't get loose in practice. I mean, he was good in practice, but like, for him, it was like, okay, focus on the technique and stuff like that. And, and then he would just kind of But on game day, when the adrenaline was flowing, for whatever reason, when he had adrenaline flowing, it would loosen his muscles up, and he was unguardable. And he was like 6'1.5", 6'2", so he had great ball skills and, knew how to run routes and was a good blocker. So he was a heck of a player. The only other kid that would, if you took in like take away division and pure talent, but just best for that level, the other kid that would be in the conversation is running back I coached at Muhlenberg named Matt Bernardo. He was an excellent player. He was an All-American the year I coached him, had like 1,300 rushing yards, 20 touchdowns. He also returned kicks. He had a kick return for a touchdown. He caught, I think, 2 or 3 passes for touchdowns. I mean, he had like 300 something yards receiving that year. Just an excellent player. So Matt was a really good player as well. And that whole team, that was, I said before, I think that's probably my favorite team to coach. CNU is probably my second favorite team to coach. But that Muhlenberg team in 2002 was my favorite team to coach, and Matt was our best player. But he was just a blue collar kid, and he never talked. He was real quiet. He just went out and just did his job and played at a great level, and that was just an excellent player. So first All-American I coached 2 in 7 years, and he was my first one. But if you take level out of it, just kind of like who was the most dominant, I think Matt deserves to be in that conversation with Michael. But just best pure player, it would have to be that.
So I obviously coach at a different level. I coach high school football. And I coached 2 kids that went pretty far. The first kid, his name's Shaq Van. He was our running back, and he was a dude. Obviously we're in Northern Indiana, so you got to obviously take that into account. But he had like 425 yards against South Bend St. Joe. I mean, he was just a really, really good player. He ended up going to Eastern Michigan, playing there for 5 years, I believe. He's the grad assistant on their staff now, so he's staying in the game. And the other one would be Danny Pinner. He was offensive tackle for me when I coached him, and then the varsity coach decided to turn him into a tight end, and now he's playing offensive line in the NFL. So, and I think he's going to start at guard for the Colts this year. So pretty fired up about Danny. And Danny and Shaq are both also 2 of the greatest kids that I've ever, been around. Like, they love my kids, and like they're just really, really good kids, as well as being really good in the classroom and then really good football players. So
interesting connection here, Vince, as you said, he's at Eastern Michigan.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So the head coach at Eastern Michigan, Chris Creighton,
yes,
I coached against him my first year as a coach. Okay. He was still at Wabash. And I coached against him when I was at Wittenberg, and we beat them. They were probably the best team we played all year in the regular season. Now, we lost the game that year, but they were better than the team that we lost to. The team we lost to, we literally played the Saturday after 9/11.
Yeah, okay.
Like, they still made us play. Like, we had to drive up to Alma, Michigan to play.
Thursday, by the way, it was 9/11, I believe.
It was Tuesday. It was early in the week. It was like Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. But they still made us play. So our kids' heads were not in that game. And like, we had 2 camera guys not show up, so I ended up having to go up and film the flipping game. It was just a hot mess. And so it was the life of a D3 coach. But I mean, they weren't better than us. Our kids just weren't. Our kids weren't in it.
Right.
But Wabash was the best team we played in the regular season that year. Now, the best team we played all year was Mount Union, right? Because we played them in the 3rd round of the playoffs. But yeah, so Chris Creighton, the head coach at Eastern Michigan,
he recruited Jack.
I'm 1-0 against him.
There you go. There you go. He seems like a good guy, as far as I know. I don't know.
He's a really good coach. I mean, like that team we had way better players than them.
Yeah.
But it was a close game because they were really well coached. So I'm not surprised at all that he made it up to the Division I level. I'm not shocked at all.
He seems to be very comfortable at that level, at the MAC level. Like, that seems to be kind of his wheelhouse.
Well, I think he likes the real coaching aspects of it.
Right.
I think, I think he enjoys the relationships, and that's a lot. You get that a lot from D3 coaches, the traditional D3 coaches, not the guys that are just using D3 as a stepping stone and they don't care. Right. I think the guys that valued being part of that level, because there is so much more in it than just winning and losing games. I mean, you're dealing with young people who are playing to play football. They're not being paid to play football. Right. They are paying to play football. Right. And so, the development of young men is very important at that level. And from what I've been told, he's continued that at Eastern Michigan.
They do a really cool thing where they literally climb a mountain every offseason. And like, I mean,
was he the one that started that whole tearing down that brick thing? I hope that wasn't him. I hope that was before he got there because that was super lame.
It made a bit. I think it was him.
Yeah, that was super lame.
I think that was him.
Super lame.
But the climbing the mountain thing I thought was really, really cool. Like it takes a few days to like climb up there and they camp out and do the whole thing. And like, it's a really big deal. So
that's pretty cool.
But anyway, yeah, Shaq and Danny for me, for sure. Really good kids. All right. Andy Mack wants to know if Chad Bowden long-term goal is to continue leading the recruiting department, or would he like to become a coach eventually? Thanks for the content. Makes the second half of work fly by.
I would imagine that Chad is doing what he loves to do. Now, would he like to kind of, maybe become a GM or something down the road? Maybe, I don't know. But he's not a coach. Meaning like that's not his background. I mean, if you don't know, his dad is Jim Bowden, who was the general manager of the Cincinnati Reds. This is the guy who made the trade for the Ken Griffey Jr. So his dad always has a special place in my heart because that was my favorite player, and he traded to my favorite team back when the Reds actually tried to make moves to win. But
they had a no-hitter.
Yeah, and lost. But my guess would be he'd want to do something along those lines, but I think he likes what he's doing. I think he likes the recruiting aspect of it, the team building aspect of it. I mean, and it's a very important role if you use it right, and Marcus Freeman's using it right. Yeah. And, it was an incredibly wise move for Marcus Freeman to get Chad Bowden here, in the first place, to get him here at Notre Dame, which he did when he was coming as an assistant. And obviously that was a big part of what they're doing. So, I don't know what his ultimate goals are as far as like getting to the top of whatever he views his profession to be. But I think it's always going to be about talent acquisition. Yeah. It would be my guess, so, I mean, could he maybe move on to an NFL team or something? Perhaps, I guess that's 100% pure speculation on my part. Whatever he's going to do, I think it's going to be talent acquisition. But, from all indications, he loves what he's doing right now, working for Coach Freeman and doing a great job at Notre Dame. So, but if they continue to pile up top 3 classes year after year, he's going to become a hot commodity. And in that regard, just like, coaches are when they do a great job coaching.
Mm-hmm. Kamikaze fullback question for fun. How good do you think Tyler Buckner would be if they put him back to return punts and kicks this year? What Notre Dame quarterback have you watched that would be a dynamic return man?
I want no part of that action.
Well, the last part's
Tyler Buckner.
I think the last one's Tony Rice, right?
Oh, no, I'd throw Arnez Battle and Carlo Holiday into the conversation. Because Carlo ended up playing at receiver in the NFL, right? And Arnez Battle ended up playing receiver in the NFL too. I mean, they were quarterbacks in Notre Dame, so I'd have to go back to those guys. I would say that those guys would probably. Now, I don't know if Malik was really athletic, but Malik wasn't super fast, so I don't know if Malik would have been that. But I mean, goodness. Arnez Battle, Carlo Holiday, I have to think would be really good choices for me. I wonder if Arnez even returned kicks at Notre Dame, because remember he started the season at quarterback before he got hurt, right. And the year that Matt LaVecchio took over at quarterback, Arnez started that year at quarterback before he got hurt, and then obviously he came back the next year and they moved him to receiver. But those would be my two bets. Be my 2 guesses. I'm trying to think like Deshaun Kaiser, Everett Colson. No, I can't think of who else would it be other than those guys. And then obviously, like you said, Tony Rice would obviously be in that conversation.
Return punts and return kicks; those are 2 completely different return, profiles, right? Return punts, you almost have to be a little bit twitchy because you really got to make that first man miss. Return kicks, it's more straight line speed and seeing the hole and bursting through it. So, I mean, it's a different profile for sure. I mean, from a Tyler Buckner standpoint, just to play with his game here a little bit, I don't see him as like a twitchy punt return kind of guy. I don't see that out of Tyler Buckner's game. If I had to pick between the 2, I would say he'd be a better kick return guy. I wouldn't do either one, but that would be my choice.
I think he is a little twitchy. If you're going to force him back there, I think he'd be okay. Because the other thing Tyler has too is Tyler's got really strong lower body. He's a thick kid. He can kind of do that exactly. But I want no part of that action.
I don't want any part of that
action at all. As a matter of fact, I think I just got a call. Hold on a second. I just got a text. That's Marcus Freeman saying he wants me to ban, and Tommy Reese texted me the same thing. He wants me to ban whoever brought up putting Tyler back. I obviously am joking. I did not get a text from Tommy Reese and Marcus Freeman, but yeah, ban whoever brought up possibly putting Tyler Buckner back there returning kicks. I'm just kidding, kamikaze. Speaking of kamikaze,
anyway. Right. Yeah. Zach has another question. He says, put together your own dream coaching staff from any level. You are the head coach. That's tough.
Yeah, that's super tough. I mean, any level. I don't know enough about the best NFL coaches to know that, to be honest with you. I mean, I'll say this, Zach, I'm kind of happy with the staff that Notre Dame has right now. I mean, it's doing a pretty good job. I will say this in all seriousness. I know for a fact there'd be, if I scour all levels of football, there's one guy for sure, two guys for sure that I would still have at Notre Dame. And that's the head coach and the offensive line coach for sure. But there's a lot of other guys I'd probably consider keeping. I mean, Tommy Reese, we'll see what he does, but I'm encouraged by what he's doing. How would I not have Al Washington on staff with the job he's doing right now on the recruiting trail? You know what I mean? Like, Al Golden, it's a great fit. I mean, there's a lot of potential with this staff. And so I want to see the staff play out, but I'd have to think about that one, Zach. That might be a fun one. I know, Zach, you're a member of the message board. Questions like that require me to draw through all 130 teams in college football in the NFL are great message board questions, because then it gives me time to think about it and research. But
I got a great high school staff put together, but you guys would know none of those people, so it wouldn't really work out.
Yeah, yeah. I better at least get an offer, an OC offer. I'll turn it down, but I better at least get it. We'll have a problem. Right. So we've already had that conversation.
We have, actually. Yes. Okay. Shane O'Shea says, with BK gone, do you see Reese simplifying the offense at all so young receivers can get on the field earlier?
That's a great question, Shane. Great question, because I think he won't simplify it schematically, but I think he'll simplify it from a teaching standpoint. And that's the problem. The problem, when I mean simplify, is I don't think you're going to see okay, this receiver has 4 or 5 different route options in this play. I think, but they're going to ask the receivers to do a lot of different things. It's just when we make a call, this is basically what you're doing. I think there's going to be some simplification from that regard. Or at least there needs to be. I'm hopeful that there is. I've heard good things about the receivers aren't having the same issues. I'm not hearing the same complaints I had in the past about how challenging it is and difficult it is and all that kind of stuff. So my hope is that continues, but I think you can simplify your teaching without necessarily simplifying your scheme. And I think that's a different thing, Vince. I mean, it's like, number one, having a diverse scheme, but where your routes carry over to different concepts, that's a different thing. And then you've got 12 to 13 different route options, or 14, 15 different route options that you can then kind of mix and match into the kind of different concepts you want to have with them. I think adds some ability to be more diverse while also simplistic enough to not be overwhelming kids and still being able to teach them a proper technique.
Well, and I think that's the key too, though, Brian. I think they're being taught better now. Well, I just feel like they're being prepared at a higher level so that they're going to be able to perform at a higher level, both mentally and physically, when they get on the field. I don't think, it felt like in the past there was just this barrier that these guys weren't going to get past. And I think that was partly due to the scheme, and I think it was partly due to the coaching. And I think there's going to be a difference in both, where they're going to meet in the middle, where these guys can be successful at a young age. That's the best way I can come up. That's the best way I know how to explain how both. I think it has to come from both sides. It has to come from the coaching aspect at the position level, but it also has to come from a schematic level, like you were talking about.
No, I agree.
Guinea Pig Clips says, could you see Marist getting drafted this year? I think that's kind of a loaded. Could he be drafted?
I would say absolutely, because if he declares, it means he had a monster year and he would get drafted. Now, how high, that's a different question. Exactly. But I think he definitely would get drafted. Could I see it? Yes. Do I predict it or anticipate it? No, I don't. I think he'll probably be here for 2 more years. But if he comes out this year and has 115 tackles and 12 tackles for loss and 4 sacks and a couple picks, and he's part of a great defense, and now he goes to the playoff, yeah, okay. A guy that had a major injury last year, he may say, you know what? I don't want to take a chance of that happening again. I'm going pro because I'm getting feedback that I'm going to be a day 2 pick or whatever the case may be. And, then he would leave. I don't see Marist leaving without getting some kind of feedback that he's going to be a relatively highly drafted player.
Agreed.
And, but again, I would have, Kevin Austin had the same situation and he made the decision to leave. So nowadays you just never know.
This is an interesting one from Sean Kane. He says, which would have a better chance of being a playoff team? Notre Dame team that loses to Ohio State and then finishes 11-1, or a team that beats Ohio State and slips up against, say, BYU and finishes 11-1?
I think the team that beat Ohio State would be the one there, Vince, because you'd have a much better resume.
So I think that they have the better percentages of making it, but I will also say that I think both of these teams make it. I don't see much of a scenario, unless you're talking about 4 undefeated teams ahead of them, that the 11-1 team that loses to BYU doesn't get in. But obviously, I think you lose earlier, and if it's a competitive game and you win the rest, you're in. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I think the only exception for me would be if it's a situation where the teams they play ended up not being as good.
Sure.
If they get in a situation where, like, let's say Clemson's a 4-loss team, USC still sucks, and they get beat up by Ohio State by 20.
Right.
Kind of like last year. If it's a similar situation to last year where they end up not beating really any ranked teams and they get blown out, I could see it. But even then, Notre Dame still almost made the playoff this year at 11-1 with all that happening, And so I think both would make it. But as far as better chance, I mean, look, if you have a road win over Ohio State at worst this year is going to be 10-2 at worst. You know what I mean? And, I'd say, but I kind of feel like if they lose to Notre Dame in the opener, they're going to, I feel terrible for the next 11 teams they play.
Yeah.
But I'm serious. Like I'd feel really bad for those next 11 teams. Cause like now Ohio State's gonna be pissed off all year. And they're in a situation where they can't afford to lose again.
Right.
So there's not gonna be any overlooking anybody. So yes, I remember it's like when Ohio State got pounded by Michigan or Iowa in 2017. I don't know if I said it to you, I said it to a couple buddies. I was like, man, I feel terrible. First thing I did after I saw that was look at the schedule and say who they play next week. And I said, man, I feel terrible for the team they play next week. And it was Michigan State. And Michigan, if you remember that year, Michigan State was a 10-win team. And Ohio State went out the next week and just absolutely obliterated them. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was 48-3. That was a 10-win team. And that team was just kind of pissed off the rest of the year. And I feel like if Notre Dame goes and beats them at their place, they'd just be pissed off the rest of the year and would be really, really tough. So, and they're going to have some games on their schedule that are going to allow them to get right. They're going to have a lot of get right games next year. So they would not be a fun team to play if Notre Dame beats them in the opener,
which is going to happen. But I'm just kidding. All right. Sean Ziegler says Marcus Freeman's Twitter bio has him labeled as Dick Corbett head football coach. What does that mean? That means that Dick Corbett is a very rich man, and he gave a lot of money to the University of Notre Dame and said, I want my money to go directly to the head football coach to help pay for his salary, and I want my name attached to the title. And there are multiple positions on the football team, I do believe, that are endowed. That's what that's called. They're endowed by boosters. And Dick Corbett is one. I think there's one for the defensive coordinator.
Former players as well. Like Pat Eilers gave money for the
right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But that's meant to, it's also meant to, it's not just like, it's like a lot of money have your name on it, but it's money that goes to the football program.
Right.
It's a way to get your money directly to the football program.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lot of other instances, and I'm being real loose with this because I know there's all different situations. And if my buddy in development is listening, you can always correct me, but it's not easy to just give them money and say this is going to this unless it's for a project, unless you're raising money for the Crossroads project, right?
Right.
But this is a way to make sure that money goes directly to the football program, because you're basically what they're doing. And this is why I say when Notre Dame says they paid Brian Kelly $1 million, that's what they were paying. Dick Corbett was paying part of his salary too. Under Armour was paying part of his salary. NBC was paying part of his salary. Brian Kelly was making a lot more than $1 million.
Oh yes.
So that's what that means. And so
I'm pretty sure the women's basketball coach, I think Neil Ivey has one, and like there's
Gray as well. But like you just saw Coach Freeman posing with Mr. Corbett recently in Twitter. It's the one I sent to you. I was like, why is he posing with Brian Kelly? Because Dick Corbett looked a little bit like Brian Kelly. But I was
like, wait, what?
Yeah. And then I sent you the tweet, and you're like, man,
you stink.
Yeah. But No, it's not like people say, "Oh, you're just an ego, get your name." Well, okay, maybe, but if I was that successful, I might have a little bit of an ego too. But it's also, again, I want to make sure we're clear. It's also a way to directly make sure that you're giving money to the football program to make that money, make sure that Notre Dame could afford to hire a Marcus Freeman and keep Brian Kelly here all those years and be competitive for those things, where in the past they couldn't be competitive enough in head coaching salary. So, what Dick Corbett has done, whether you think his name should be on there or not, is make sure that Notre Dame can be very competitive when it comes to paying a coach's salary. And so, yes. Yeah, I think it's a great
idea, frankly. It's just an easy way to funnel money where it needs to go,
Agree.
And there's a lot of projects that are going on right now that they're trying to raise money for. So, Zach Martin says, who is your biggest miss for a projection? I projected Derek Barton to Mark Grace on a report. Zach Martin, is he a baseball guy?
Apparently. My biggest miss for projection is, I will always say this, it's Josh Barajas. I mean, I thought Josh Barajas was going to be a stud, and he couldn't even play at the FCS level. Now, there are reasons why he struggled. Right? He had some personal issues and that led him to not being in the greatest shape and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I thought Josh Barajas was going to be. When they flipped him from Penn State, I was like,
he was the linebacker from Andrean, the same school that Bowen goes to, which is about an hour west of here.
Yeah,
I remember him. Yeah,
he was a good tight end, really good edge rusher. I was like, man, this kid's going to be really good. Yeah. And he went to the Army. He went to the Army All-American game and looked really good down there. And they had to flip him from Penn State. And I mean, I thought he's going to be really good, and he just never panned out. But I mean, even then, like when I saw him as a freshman, I was like, yeah, this isn't the guy that I thought he was going to be. And I don't know if the issue had already started by then or not, but was a really big miss.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
Guinea pig clips. What are our chances with Micah Bell?
Good. I mean, I think, look, he's going to visit. He already likes Notre Dame a lot already, which surprises me. I mean, it's just the amount of interest and Rod Baber said this when we had him on the show to interview him. He's like, yeah, the kids will be interested in Notre Dame. And he was right. I mean, there's a lot of kids in Texas right now that have a very high interest in Notre Dame at this point in time. So, and Micah Bell's one of them. He is scheduled to visit the weekend of June 17th to the 19th. So he'll be in town that weekend with Samuel Mpemba and some other big time players. And it's going to be their chance to impress them. But yeah, I don't think he's in the same boat that Braylon James was, where Braylon basically came to commit on his first visit. I don't see that being the case, like as going in. Now, could it happen? Sure. But I do know he likes Notre Dame a lot. And I think they're definitely one of his top 2 or 3 schools for sure. No question. And he's a big one because that kid, he's at a position of need, cornerback, but he's got multiple 10-4s on his docket this spring in the 100-meter dash. So, yeah, he can run.
You're going to have to tell me what website that is that you look at for the track.
Yeah, number. You just type in your kid's name and track, and it'll pop up.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Shane O'Shea, what are the D-line recruiting numbers for 2024, assuming that they get more in this class? That means they would have 5 in this class. So what does that mean moving forward?
I would say 4, but again, a lot of this is going to depend, Shane, on what happens with the current roster. Is there some depletions from the current roster that allow them to go to 5 again? Potentially. We'll see if some guys get beat out by younger players, but as of right now, I think the number's 4. I think they'd like to get another edge guy and they'd like to get another interior guy, but I think what you're going to see them do is do the exact same thing they did this year that they did last year, or next year that they did this year, which is Al Washington and Chad Bowden and Al Golden are going to pound on the table saying, we need 5, we need 5, we need 5 until they give in and let them get 5. And you can do that. If you're making your case for a 5th and your 5th is Jason Moore, you're going to get your way.
Right.
When you're making a case for a 5th and your 5th is Elijah Rushing or Nigel Smith or Jayshon Ross or, Justin Scott or a guy like that, then they'll let you get your 5th. But you're also going to be smart about the first ones you bring in.
Sure.
It's got to be like, hey, look, you shouldn't have taken a chance on these 2 project kids, right? I mean, but
right.
Notre Dame's not doing that. I mean, Wafel's not a project. You know what I mean? Brandon Davis-Swain is not a project. They're very good football players, especially Brandon Davis-Swain's a top 100 kid.
Wafel's dad made his son look small.
Yes. And apparently I'm sorry, that was mean. The guy doing the interview yesterday was obsessed with that and saying other dumb things, but I'm sorry, that was one of the worst.
I heard, I watched, and that was just not good.
Like, you're going to sit there and argue with a kid who just said the team he committed to is going to win a championship, and you're going to sit there and argue with him, basically, is what he was doing. I think your friends behind you might, disagree with you. Shut up, dude. Oh, so annoyed.
It's a terrible
So
interview.
annoyed. That's a dude who does not follow college football, has no clue who he's interviewing, and was just handed this assignment like the
interviewing
day morning of.
is not difficult. Get 5 minutes of prep, you could have done a better interview than that. So I'll just say that. Guinea Pig says, "What's the latest with Micah T?"
Hey, Vince, let's push this one back to Ryan. Because Ryan will have a better sense of where that is.
That works.
So
that works.
Yeah.
TB12 for Heisman. I've heard vague comments referring to something happening in the lead up to the 2019 Michigan game. What really happened?
What really happened is Brian Kelly didn't get his team ready, and so when they failed miserably, like they did in every other big game, he had to blame somebody for it. And Chip Long became the fall guy. And I said this to him at the time. I said, watch your back because you're going to be the guy that gets blamed for this.
I remember that, actually. I remember you and I having that conversation in the beginning of the season, and then it came to fruition.
Yep.
I remember that really, really well.
Yep. So, but yeah, it was, look, I remember talking like, it's same BS with like Phil Dracovic, trying to throw him under the bus and, all the other stuff that Brian Kelly's done, blaming everybody else for why he didn't have his team ready to play. All I know is I talked to somebody in the press box before the game, former NFL player, and he said, they don't want to be here. It's before the game. They don't want to be here. And if something happened during the week and you couldn't get your team past it, you're not a very good head coach.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
And you should have dealt with that when it happened during the week. But no, there was nothing like that. It was simply put, the head coach did not get his team ready to play. They didn't prepare to play in the rain. I mean, that's just that I was told that leading up. Vince, you and I talked about this before the game. I was like, dude, I don't know if they're ready for the rain. They didn't practice like a team, and we knew rain was coming all week. Yes. I mean, it's obvious it was going to rain all weekend, and they didn't prepare. That's a head coach's problem, not anybody else's problem.
Such an easy thing to, I mean, yeah. To look at the weather report.
Yep.
It's just ridiculous.
Yep.
Okay. Tommy Guns, obviously he's on the message board and he saw your post about the 93 team. He says, top 5 all-time must-watch Notre Dame games that are actually watchable.
Well, I would mean that they're on YouTube or something. The only ones that I know of for a fact that are on there that I think are great games, I don't even know if I can get to 5, so I'll give you the best I can. Obviously, 88 Miami's on YouTube, 93 Florida State's on YouTube. I know this for a fact. The 73 bowl game against Alabama, that is Lou Samoji's favorite game, is on YouTube because Lou used to show it to me all the time, which I say that with endearment because it was just like to see him get excited about something like that was just phenomenal. I mean, and then the 88 West Virginia game was obviously one that I loved, especially Tommy, you're a younger guy. So, you weren't alive for that. Vince barely remembers that. So I would say that is a big one. I mean, there's a couple games from 88 that were big. The Miami game, the USC game, that was 1 versus 2. So I think those are ones just off the top of my head, but there's a lot. And I'm actually, so what I did the other day, Tommy, what I did last night was I kind of, I've been watching film of past seasons and just, like keeping fresh and stuff. And I was watching some 93 films. So what I did was I just went and found every 93 game that I could find a video of and put it into one message board post. I think I'm going to keep doing that. I think I'm just going to like some seasons that I remember or some games I remember and just kind of throw them on there after I watch them.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll do some more of that. But, I think there's if you can find the Cotton Bowl where Notre Dame, it was 77 season. I always get this confused. So I think it was a 77 season when they beat Texas. They were number 5 and they beat number 1 Texas in the Cotton Bowl, like 38-10, which vaulted them up to number 1 for the championship, which is another reason why I would love to see them go to the bowls determining who is in the playoff. Because again, something like that, Number 5 Notre Dame wouldn't have had a chance to jump up to number 1 and win a title if it wasn't for that.
Exactly.
If there was a playoff back then, I should say. So that's another reason I would love to see that. But yeah, those are just some early games that I look at.
Kamikaze says, could this be a year with no truly dominant team to compete for a national championship, like you've said about 2017? I think. Big 3, Clemson, questions on offense, Ohio State on defense, and Bama thinks they're the Yankees.
You left a team off of there. It's the defending national champions. Georgia. Look, I think that Ohio State's going to be very, very talented. Clemson's down. I mean, you have to throw Georgia in that conversation. I'm sorry. They're the defending champions, so they deserve to be on there. And yes, they lost 15 guys to the draft, but some of those guys didn't start. And they've had the number 1 or 2 recruiting class in the country, 1, 2, or 3 recruiting class in the country for like 5 years in a row. So they're still going to be very talented. And they got some transfers. So I would say those 4 are in it. I don't think this year will be like last year. I think last year, Vince,
was wide open.
Yeah, and I thought last year was very, very wide open. I didn't think there was any. I think that, like I've said this, that Georgia team that won the title last year, I feel would get smacked by the 2017 Georgia team. I just do. I look, they had everybody talks about the talent, the defense, but they had a very mediocre offense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And even their defense had holes. It just, what did I say going into the year? The SEC was down last year. I said that going into the year. The SEC is going to be down. I think that made their defense look even better than it was.
Sure.
And it was still very, very good defense. But, I heard somebody say the other day, this is better than the 2018 Clemson defense. And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather face this year's Georgia defense than that Clemson defense. I mean, again, let's not forget what Bama did to that defense. That was the only good team Georgia played all year was Bama in the SEC title game, and they got shredded by Bama in that game. So I just, let's look at their schedule last year. It was they played Clemson in the opener. Clemson ended up not being that good. Georgia scored 3 offensive points in that game. Remember, they had a defensive touchdown. They won 10-3. They played UAB, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, decent, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, who sucked, Missouri, Tennessee, Charleston Southern, Georgia Tech. That was their regular season schedule. Wow. Then they played Alabama in the SEC title game and lost 41-24.
Right.
And that defense got worked. And, so I just 536 yards, 7.7 yards per play. They got worked in that game. So, heck, even Michigan had 5.2 yards per play in that game, and their offense stunk. So, yeah, they were a great run defense. I'll say they were a great run defense last year. I just don't think they were a great overall defense compared to some past teams. I think their secondary is very vulnerable against the pass, as Alabama showed us. But it's like, who on that schedule was going to make them pay for that? Okay. I mean, Hendon Hooker actually threw for some yards against them. And the thing about that game is they were missing like 3 of their top 4 receivers in that game were hurt. Yeah. Who else? I mean, Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones going to throw on you. Will Levis is going to throw on you. You know what I mean? Like, just whatever. And then that powerhouse Charleston Southern team they played late. Georgia Tech is garbage. They beat Georgia Tech by the same score Notre Dame did. So I don't think last year's Georgia team was great. It was a very good team, and they earned the title, right? Whatever. But they were not a great team. They would have got punished by 2019 LSU. I think they got smacked by 28 Clemson. I think they got smacked by their own 2017 team. Ryan Roberts just texted me, said that's future first-round pick Will Levis to you. So because there's all these people projecting to be a first-round pick, which I told him the other day, I'm getting serious Connor Cook, Cardell Jones, Christian Hackenberg vibes from all the mock drafts I'm seeing this year with like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis and Tyler Van Dyke. It's like, you remember that year after 2014, and everybody had like Connor Cook going to the first round, like top 5, and Cardell Jones going to the top 10, and Christian Hackenberg going to the top 10. And I'm like, none of these guys are going to be top picks. I think Hackenberg was the highest at 2, and he ended up being terrible. And then the other guys were 4th-round picks. Neither one of them's even in the NFL. None of those 3 are even in the NFL right now, which says a whole lot.
Yeah,
it says a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan says, if Tommy Rees left for the NFL after this year because of a massive Irish success, Would you like the hire of Brian Hartline as offensive coordinator, even if he has no play calling experience?
I don't know enough about Brian Hartline to say the yes or no to that. Like, look, I know that Brian Hartline's a great reputation as a receivers coach and all that, and it's well earned. I mean, the job they've done recruiting wise and developing is phenomenal. But I don't know enough about Brian Hartline. He may not be able to call a play at all. I have no clue. His lack of experience doesn't bother me. Vince, you know my stance on that. If you got the chops, you got the chops. But, for me, it's more of a, I don't know if he does have the chops. I don't know enough about him, so if he were to get hired, I'd do my research on him to find out. But I'm not saying no. I'm not saying yes. I just don't know enough about him in that part of the job. If it was just to come coach receivers, let's say Chancey Stuckey left to go back to Clemson or something, heck yeah, man, make him pass game coordinator if you got to get him here. That's a no-brainer. But offensive coordinator, I just don't have enough knowledge to be able to answer that question. And hopefully you'll understand that, Jordan. It's just not been something that's on my radar yet. One of the things I was going to do this summer was kind of put together a list of potential candidates for the 2 coordinator jobs and the D-line job, because I look at those 3 as kind of the guys that have the best chances to kind of move on and, for other jobs in the next few years. Kind of like I would have like with Brian Kelly. You have like your short list of head coaches. But I'm just not at the point yet where I know where I've be able to do enough homework to be able on Brian Hartline to know if he could or couldn't do the job. So my answer is I don't know. I don't know if I'd like the hire or not. I don't.
I'm very interested to see what you have to say to this one. Caleb Collins says, if Notre Dame wins a championship within the next 2 years, how much credit would you give Brian Kelly? Caleb says 5%.
I'd give him 25% because he hired Marcus Freeman. Look, here's the thing. What I'm not going to do, I'm not going to do revisionist history where I'm not going to give Brian Kelly credit for things now that I gave him credit for at the time.
No, and I know you would.
I know. I'm just making a point. Like, I praised Brian Kelly for making that hire. And we also talked about that this was not a hire that was forced upon him by somebody else. This wasn't a hire that Jack Swarbrick made like he did with Mike Elko and Chip Long. I've said this before. Brian Kelly didn't hire them. Brian Kelly was trying to get out of Notre Dame after 2016. Jack Swarbrick and Chad Klunder drove those hires. So I give him very little credit for those hires. Bob Diaco is the reason Matt Bayless came here. I give Brian Kelly no credit for those. Brian Kelly was very involved in getting Marcus Freeman here. Now, I don't think he handled Marcus being here very well. I think there's some jealousy involved. I think there was some immaturity involved on his part because he just didn't like the fact that anyone else but him got shine. That's how Brian Kelly is. But I'm not going to – I mean, he is the one that went for and pushed for Marcus Freeman. Now, was Jack Swarbrick involved? Yes, because when you're going toe-to-toe with an SEC team, you need to make sure the AD is right there with you. So I'm going to give Brian Kelly a lot of credit in that regard for bringing in Marcus Freeman. But that's it. That's where his credit ends because he held the program back. He would never have put together a staff like the one Notre Dame has now. Because if Brian Kelly was still here, there'd be no Harry Heastan. There'd be no Al Washington, right? Marcus Freeman would be out. He'd be gone. Because that's the other thing is if Kelly stayed, Marcus Freeman's out most likely after this year. He's a head coach somewhere else. Yeah. So, but I will give him 25% for the fact that he did hire Marcus Freeman. He deserves a lot of credit for the foresight to see that Marcus Freeman is going to be a great coach because Brian Kelly made a lot of dumb moves in his career, but for the most part, he did. Now, again, the Mike Elko thing wasn't his, but it was his decision to promote Clark Lee to defensive coordinator. And that worked out really well. It was his decision to hire Bob Diaco, which I thought Bob Diaco did a very good job at Notre Dame. A very underrated coach, underappreciated coach at Notre Dame. And he was the one that pushed for Marcus Freeman. So that is one position where he did a good job with one glaring exception, and that is, Brian Van Gorder. But for the most part, I thought he did a really nice job.
I was going to say 20%. So you went a little bit even higher than I did because
I 25. I mean,
look, I feel the same way. He still got Notre Dame to a perennially 10-win team, which they weren't.
Yeah, but I still don't give him a lot of credit for that, as I've said before. I mean, Jack Swarbrick lightening the schedule, and right. I don't even know if I'd give him that.
20%. You're not even graduating high school. I mean,
he was gone half the year. I'm just not giving him that much. Right. Based on that, all my percentage is built entirely on he hired Marcus Freeman.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
That is it.
All right, I'm bringing in Ryan Roberts for this next question. What's up, Ryan?
Vince, can you Do you have a couple more minutes? Okay, because I got to get this article ready for this. So I got to jump out, just get this article done. So you two handle it, and then I'll come cover for you.
So
and then get him the Micah T's one too before you get out too.
I got 2 of them starred for him. Okay, Tavis McKay says over under 5 commitments to Notre Dame before July 7th to give time for the planned July 4th announcements.
It's a good one. 5 commitments. All right, so Tavis, we need to set this at like a half, right? Like it needs to be 5.5 or 4.5 to make it a little easier.
I'll set it at 4.5.
Okay, we'll set it at 4.5. I'll go over 4.5. If it was 5.5, 5 seems like a good number to me. It just seems like a good number. I mean, Notre Dame feels good about where they are with Jaden Lamar. He's going to announce the end of the month. They have the July 4th is when Rodney Gallagher is going to announce. Notre Dame is in the running for that one. Rico Flores is July 3rd. You would hope at that point you'd have some clarity maybe about a Dante Moore, maybe a Jason Moore. There's a few guys that I think are going to come off the board, whether it is Notre Dame or not is to be determined, but I'll say over 4.5. I think that's a safe one.
Because you named 5 guys, and then if a couple other guys pop, man, we could be looking at a pretty healthy amount of time between now and then.
Yeah, I mean, it might even be more than that. I might be underselling it, but we'll go over 4.5 for now. We'll stick there. I just have this
feeling, and obviously you and Brian cover this stuff way more closely than I do, but once we hit summer, I just feel, and especially with those big recruiting visits coming up those first couple of weeks of June, I just feel like it, the dam is going to break a little bit when it comes to recruiting. Now they've already got 13 guys in the class, so I mean that and a few in the 24 class. So I mean they've been coming. There's no question, but I just feel like there's going to be kind of an avalanche here coming up in the summer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I don't think Notre Dame's going to have too many guys that are going to be late committers like near the signing day. Like I don't see many of the guys that I've talked to that are the top targets on the board. Like they want to kind of figure everything out by their senior year for the most part. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of guys trickling in late. I feel like we're going to have kind of clarity about the class pretty early.
Makes sense. All right, we got a couple recruiting questions here that we saved for you. Guinea Pig says, what's the latest with Micah T's, and could he play wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a tremendous update on Micah. I mean, I've been basically talking to some people close to him to find an understanding of if he is planning on getting back to campus sometime early in July or early in June, I should say. And right now, there isn't anything that's finalized. I think that there's interest to get back to Notre Dame, but it has not been just anything that has been finalized from a trip perspective yet. I would say that from what I'm hearing, Oklahoma has kind of made a little flip back into it a little bit from everything that I'm hearing. The kind of the big hang up with that one, Vince, was basically Micah T wants an opportunity to potentially play wide receiver at the next level. He's being recruited by defensive back. By every school, basically, that's on his list. Oklahoma was very firm for a little bit and said, like, no, we're just taking you as a defensive back. We're not recruiting you as an athlete. That's all you are for us. And I think that they're kind of going back on that a little bit because now for a little bit, it was like Micah T is not going to go to Oklahoma then, right? He's a Booker T. Washington kid right in Tulsa. So you really don't want to let a player like that if you're Oklahoma out of your backyard for a team that, is one of the maybe the top program in Oklahoma. So they kind of rescinded a little bit, I think, on that structure. So I think Oklahoma is going to get back into this a little bit. Notre Dame did a very smart thing when all that stuff happened between Oklahoma and Micah T, and they basically said, like, we're recruiting you as an athlete. You can come here. You get an opportunity to play wide receiver. We still like you best at corner, but you can have the opportunity. That's kind of what Mike is looking for. As far as could he play wide receiver? Yeah, 100%. He can. He can play wide receiver at a very high level. I still like him a lot more on the defensive side of the ball, personally. I think his ball skills, quickness, reactionary quickness, just ability to close quickly on underneath routes, good ball skills, good speed. I think it all kind of really lends well to playing corner, but he can definitely play wide receiver at a high level. There's no doubt.
The other recruiting question we got here for you says, who is the leader for Darion Gillette?
It's a great question, and I honestly don't know the answer to it. I mean, he's a national recruit. I will say this. He's been to Tuscaloosa already. I know Notre Dame wants to try to get him on campus sometime over the next couple months. He's a Texas kid, obviously, so all the Texas schools are very high on him. I think Alabama was a little bit of a game changer for him, to be honest. When I talked to the coach last, as soon as he got the offer from Alabama, that was kind of like a moment where he was like, whoa, that's like Nick Saban, like that's kind of crazy. So I would say it's probably an Alabama or staying in Texas type of situation right now. I wouldn't say that Notre Dame's really in the battle yet. I think they're trying to get in the battle because he's never been to campus. And every time I talk to the coach, he's very interested in Notre Dame because he's an academically driven kid. And he really does like just kind of the aura around the program. But until he gets on campus, I just don't feel great about that one at this moment. And it could completely change very quickly. But right now, I'd say it's a school in Texas, whether that is Texas A&M, or in Alabama is probably the favorites for Daring Gillette right now.
All right. TB12 for Heisman. We're going on the other side of the Notre Dame experience. What player on the current roster will get drafted the highest overall?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, my immediate thought would be a quarterback, right? But I mean, that's a little bit of a projection to see if Buckner can get to that spot. I mean, Vince, like who's the guys that pop out immediately? I would say like Isaiah Foskey if he takes a big step, right? Blake Fisher, maybe if he makes a gigantic leap and he's got that size profile. I don't know if anybody else. I mean, otherwise, I mean, those are the positions that matter most in the NFL draft world, right? It's edge rushers, offensive tackles, and quarterbacks. So if it's not Tyler Buckner, I would say it's probably Blake Fisher.
Your hatred for Joe Alt never ceases to amaze me.
Hatred.
Well, that's what people do now, right? If you don't rank someone number one, you're a hater. Isn't that how it works? I mean, I've been trying to get caught up on my Twitter, proper Twitter etiquette. And if you don't say someone's phenomenal, then you're a hater. So that's what I just did. I not do that right? Did I not do that right?
Well, no, you if you say anything negative about any quarterback on Twitter, that's what gets them riled up, Ryan.
Yes,
like I just said something. Yes. I just said something about Jalen Hurts earlier not being good, and people lost their minds. Just can't believe it, man.
Some things are obvious, right? I mean, that's one of the many reasons I hate Twitter. It's like just there's no sense. Like you just take it. Oh, you're a hater. Like okay, so everyone's awesome, right? I feel like we should be on Twitter just doing the Lego movie. Everything is awesome. You know what I mean? Like whatever, dude.
Moral of the story is Joe Alt's great. Joe Alt's great.
Yes. I'm not a hater. You're an idiot. That's basically should be your response. Right. So there you go.
All right.
There you go.
Will June, July, or May be a bigger recruiting month for the Irish?
Ooh. As far as like commitments, I guess you got to kind of set the stage. Like to me, there's no bigger month than June because that's when everybody's going to be on campus. If you're talking about number of commitments, that's an interesting one. I'd probably say July.
I'd say
would
July
be my
guess.
Yeah, just because
we already know a couple are going to be committing in July, right? Like we already know a couple commitment dates, like Gallagher and Flores, and
Christian Gray.
I would say July.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now again, you all have to remember that a lot of times commitments don't get announced when they happen. Right. So it could be June. We just aren't going to know about it till July, because I mean, that's what happened with Sullivan Absher, right? Like Sullivan Absher counts as a May commitment. He doesn't count towards the big April we talked about, but he committed in April. He committed to the staff in April, right? There's others, Devin Houston counts as a May commitment. He committed to the staff in April, right? So just the way it's working nowadays with every kid going on CBS Sports and being interviewed by someone who has no knowledge of their recruitment, which has to be a ton of fun. They're doing that instead of committing like kind of right. Because it used to be where like kids would just commit then, and then we would do our jobs, find out, break the recruitments, break the commitments. Then the advent of social media, eventually kids started kind of breaking their own commitments. They would just do it on Twitter and do it up. Now it's like every kid's doing on CBS Sports HQ, which, whatever works for them.
They need to get some better interviewers if that's is that the way they're going?
Yes. There's a lot of things they need to do better.
They need to hire Irish Breakdown to handle their interviews.
Hard pass. Yeah, I'm sure that'd go really well with the people at Irish Illustrated. Yeah, I'm sure that would go really well since they are affiliated with 247 Sports. But whatever. I just I wish I want competition, right? Like that's my big thing is just get some other services to start doing this, right? I mean, that's because CBS HQ is just a hot mess. Just a hot, and then why do we need to go to commercials? Like what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
I mean,
All right, Vince.
I'm fine with like one commercial break. When they start getting to like
Right.
the 3 commercial breaks, then it's
right.
a little much.
Exactly. All right. Jordan Schreiber says, when it's all said and done, who do you think has a better haul for the Irish? The D-line, for the Irish D-line, 2023 or 2024? That's actually my initial reaction was easy, 2023. But then I started thinking about like, well, I mean, but what if they get Nigel Smith and Elijah Rushing and all that? And I would still say probably 2023 because I think Keon Keeley's still the best prospect they're going to sign in that 2-year class. And I really like Jason Moore if they get him. I think it all depends on if they get Jason Moore, to me. Like if they get Jason Moore, then it's a done deal. It'd be 2023. If they don't get Jason Moore, then somehow you look at like they're able to get Elijah Rushing and Nigel Smith with the 2 kids they got. Maybe they get a Justin Scott. Now all of a sudden we're having a different conversation. So I think Jason Moore is going to be the key to the 2023 class. If they get Jason Moore, it's going to be really hard for me to see 2024 being better. But you know what I would like to see, Ryan? Them try.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean, my immediate response is the same as you. I think if they don't get Jason Moore in this cycle for Notre Dame, then it's a good debate. And I think that it would be a very close one because then you're aligning guys, right? You're saying, hey, if it's a Keon Keeley versus an Elijah Rushing, probably take Keeley. But if Rushing takes a huge jump, maybe it's a push. Then you got the Brendan Vernon versus Nigel Smith conversation, which I think is a great conversation to have. But if you have Jason Moore in the class, just find it hard to believe that it's better. 2024 is better because that 2023 haul is about as good as it's been ever. Like it's an insane class.
We've called it a generational class. I mean, that's the thing. It's a generational class. They just announced that the Notre Dame Ohio State game is going to be, maybe this wasn't just announced, but it's going to be at 7:30. It's going to be a night game in Columbus,
which helps Ohio State a little bit.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep. That's where the home field advantage happens, man. At night.
Yep. At night, Ohio State doesn't lose a whole lot of night games, but we'll see how it all plays out. Let's get to the next one here from Zach Martin. Brian, what was your money play as a quarterback and or coordinator? It just depends on the team. I mean, your money play is what what you feel you're going to go to. So is it a 3rd and 1? Is it a 2nd and 10? Do we feel like we can get an isolation in a certain aspect? It was always different. I'd say, probably looking back to Muhlenberg, we had a couple different things that we really liked. Obviously, inside zone was our bread and butter play. We had a play action post route that we would throw if we needed a big play. But we ran a counter screen that was really effective. And honestly, if our quarterback didn't throw it 2 feet in front of our running back, I talked about earlier, Matt Bernardo, we score against John Carroll and have a shot to beat them in the playoffs too. So that was a big play for us. At Duquesne, it was double post. Well, Duquesne and Christopher Newport, it was double post. That was our bread and butter play, was double post. We killed people with that. I mean, we destroyed people with double posts. And CNU, it was effective, but not quite as effective. We did really well with smash concept at CNU. But again, it just depends on the game, right? So like, when we played Salisbury in the playoffs in 2004, we had like our money play was like when we needed a big play, we had something we saw. So I told you the other day I played at Salisbury. The defensive coordinator at Salisbury was the guy that was there when I was there. And so I knew what he did. I saw him every day in practice. I knew what he liked. And so I knew that when you go twins out of a 2-back, they're going to go corner over, right? So if we went two receivers to one side with a tight end and then 2 running backs, they were going to put both corners over. Well, if you motion across, they're going to take the corner with them. So what we did was we put 2 receivers, but we put our running back in slot. And we put a receiver in the backfield. Well, they didn't see it. So then we motioned George Jones out. So then the safety had to run over with George, and we threw a touchdown on him, right? And so that was the money play that game. So, it would change week to week. we knew we could have post dig against Washington Jefferson the next week. And so we ran it on I think the first series of the game and banged it for like a 50-yard touchdown. It just would depend each week what the matchups are, how they do coverage wise. I think when you really get to like money play, it's more run game. Like we're going to run inside zone every week. Like we're going to run inside zone this week. We just got to figure out how we're going to do it. Right. But pass game wise, it depends on just what your personnel is. I mean, there were routes we would run at Duquesne with Neil Lobig. We could never dream of running at, Christopher Newport with Harrison Bryant. You know what I mean? You just that's just the way it was. It just would be so personnel driven. So I never really had like a play that I'm just like, we're going to run this no matter what. It just depends on and some plays. Like one of my best memories as a coach, and I've shared this, I believe, on the show before, was, we were playing Robert Morris. Their head coach was Joe Walton. Ryan, if you remember, Joe Walton was a long-time NFL coach of the Steelers and Jets. And our best play was double post. We called it Dolphins. Well, it doesn't really, on paper, in theory, it doesn't really work against a cover 2 defense. So our head coach was very adamant that we're not going to run double post because the safety will stay over top of the post and then the linebackers get up underneath the underneath post and you're just running right into the coverage. Well, he didn't think it was going to work. And so he and I argued about it all week and he just said it just isn't going to work. And so we get into the game and I kept, I'd try to find my spots. Well, we ended up getting to a point where they were coming back. I can't remember what the score was. I think it might have been like 27-20, 26-20, something like that. We had jumped on them big. They were coming back. We needed a big play. So we got the ball at our own 18-yard line. And during that break, I said to Coach, I was like, Coach, we've got to run Dolphins. And he was like, it's not going to work. Started yelling at me. And I didn't yell back. I just said, run it, run Dolphins. So he basically threatened to fire me and stick a fork in my eye if it didn't work. But he ran it. And it worked. We went for an 82-yard touchdown to Yard and Brantley. Now, the reason it worked is because, in theory, it doesn't work against cover 2. But they had a safety that had transferred from Pitt. And he was one of those safeties that was like a peeker, right? Like he was going to peek in the backfield. And he would always flat foot at the snap in cover 2. Well, Ryan, if you're playing cover 2 and I got a 4-4-1 guy on the outside and you peek, I'm beating you. You're not going to cover that post. And that's what he would do. His name was Rob Butler. So he peeks, Yarden goes over top of him. We bang that because Yarden was the outside guy. So he peeks. And so then when he peeks, he then starts seeing that safety coming right at him. And he's late responding to Yarden. And the corner then is late receiving that. And the corner's in trail. The corner's not meant to cover the post, the outside post. He's a curl flat to flat defender. So by the time he recognizes that the safety has bit, he tries to recover. Again, you're not recovering against a 4-4-1 receiver. So Yarden catches it, wide open, bam, touchdown. And he just kind of looks up at me and smiles. You know what I mean? But the reality is he trusted me. That's why he called the play. He's not going to call the play there if he didn't trust that play because because of the fact that it was our bread and butter play. So again, it depends on the situations and the scenarios and the personnel and all that kind of stuff. So that would be my best chance at an answer. Ryan, I don't know if you guys had when you were more defensive coach, right? But did you guys have like on a third down stop, was there like a bread and butter player? Was it similar? Just depends on the matchup and your personnel.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depended on matchup. First, I wanted to ask, did you get a raise after that nice call on the double post? No. Oh, no. Okay.
No,
Should have.
Yeah.
The offensive coordinator I played with, he was a pretty diverse coach. So I don't really think he ever had any real tells, honestly, which he was kind of a tough guy to game plan against, in my opinion, honestly. But he did have a really nice, I mean, everyone has it in their playbook, but we had a nice little 2-point conversion play or a red zone play. He used to call double cannon, where it was just basically a heavy package, fake handoff, semi roll to the right, and then you would have the tight end leak back front side all the way back across the field. It was just like a tight end leak play that was, I mean, honestly, Ryan, like I coached for 5 years with him. I think he probably called it 18 times, and I think it scored 17 touchdowns. Like, it was nuts, man.
But it's a play you can't run all the time, right? I mean, that's the whole point.
It has to be against man coverage. It has to be, or else it's not going to work. Yep.
And you've got to call at that moment where, like, I remember talking to Chip Long about this. If y'all remember, Chip Long was part of the offensive staff at Arizona State in 2014 when Notre Dame went down there and played. And if you remember in that game, at the end of the game, Notre Dame had charged back. And I think they had made it like I think it was like 34-31, I think. And on that very next series, Arizona State went to a running back wheel route and just beat Notre Dame. Just threw a big play. I don't remember if they scored on that particular play, but it was a huge play, and then it led to a score in the game. I mean, it killed all Notre Dame's momentum, and the game was over. And I remember talking to Coach after he'd been hired by Notre Dame, and he's like, "Man, we knew we had that play in our back pocket. We were up 34-3. We didn't need to use it, but we knew that if we run this alignment, that they were going to ask Sheldon Day, the defensive tackle, to run with this guy, and that we could get him in an isolation." I think it was Sheldon Day. And so after they had made it 34-31, we're like, hey, we need to do something to stop this momentum. Because if you all remember, like Everett was just by that point in time, Everett was just destroying Arizona State's defense, and all the momentum was with Notre Dame. And they made that move, they made that call, and it took all momentum back. So like that's a big part of this too. Is you're looking at it saying, hey, look, we have this play. You got to make sure you use it at the right time. If they were up 27-3 and they use it to go up 34-3, was that really the best time to use it? You know, do you really want to use it early in the game when it's 0-0 or 7-0? But 34-31, okay, we need a big play right here. That's you go to it. And, you know, I don't know if that's a play that they would have run against other teams. It's just something they saw against Notre Dame that they thought would work. And that's I'll be honest, that's just the relationships with the players. I miss that. But that's the only other thing I miss about coaching is that, right? It's that gamesmanship, that, you know, that thought. I've shared this story before, Ryan, in the chat, but I don't know if I've said it to you, but like we were playing Iona and 3rd and goal, and we need a play. And so, you know, coach goes around, asks all the assistants during the timeout, what should we do? And they're all like, fade to Michael. And they get to me at the end. He goes, what should you do, Driscoll? And I said, run a draw to Hilliard. He goes, why? I said, because everybody in the stadium thinks we're going to throw a fade to Michael. You know what I mean? So there's always that kind of stuff. And then of course we run the draw and walk in for a touchdown. But you know, that's the stuff I miss about coaching. I don't miss a lot of the stuff. I don't miss recruiting. I don't miss, you know, the politics of it. I don't miss the travel. I don't miss a lot of that stuff. But the Saturday, the game planning during the week, and then the kind of the battle of minds on Saturdays, I do miss that.
It's a game of chess, man. It really is. I mean, especially when you're a coordinator, because you have to think so quickly and so strategically, you know, like you have to be especially defense, because I mean, no matter how proactive you try to be as a defensive coordinator, you're still reactionary. Like you're still reacting to what is coming in front of you, right? Like that is 100% what's happening. So it's tough calling a defense very quickly. It really is. You have to be ahead of the game a little bit, and then you have to worry about, you know, what personnel is coming in, what they like to do in this spot of the field, what are the percentages that they go to this play in this certain time. Like it's just a lot of thinking in a very short amount of time. It's not an easy thing to do.
Got a super chat from James Gray. James, thank you very, 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 very much. And then he also has a question. It says, married to a diehard Buckeye and best friends with another. Current coaching staff is them totally frustrated and sweating bullets, especially recruiting. We'll be in Columbus September 3rd. Go Irish.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, look, we had somebody on the message board talking about how he knows somebody that's on the Alabama staff, and they said the same thing. Like, and I've said this for years, Ryan, you know this. If Notre Dame ever hires a coach that cares about recruiting and he hires a staff of equal ability, Notre Dame will be a force in the recruiting trail. They just will. And so far they're showing it. And in the era of NIL, could you imagine what this recruiting class would look like if NIL wasn't a thing like it in its current form? If it was being used for its intent to help current players, you know, goodness gracious. Goodness. They'd probably have a 5-star receiver already in the class and a 5-star quarterback already in the class.
Agree.
So it is what it is. But yes, James, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that. I appreciate it. Let's get back up here to some more questions. Benjamin Carchi, is the football field at Notre Dame getting updated? Are we finally going to have Notre Dame in the end zone? This has like been asked several times. Is asked on the board. I have no idea. I haven't heard anything about. I haven't asked.
Is that a talking point? I don't
well, I mean, it's you're getting to that point. Like turf fields usually get replaced every 8 to 10 years, and you're getting up to year 9 since it was installed. Right. So, there's a thought. And then when you replace it, do you redesign it? I doubt that they do. I would love to see it, but I doubt that they do. I would love to see painted end zones and all that. Not painted, but it's how they would do it with the turf field. I'd love that. I would love to see, like, here's what I would do. I'd have Notre Dame. I'd have Notre Dame in one side and Irish in the other is what I would have in the end zones. I'd probably have like some Shamrocks in there with the Irish side or whatever. And then I'd have the Golden Dome, like, the outline of the Golden Dome that they use for their trademark. Remember when you used to play NCAA and they'd have that little trademark with the Golden Dome? I'd have that Golden Dome at like, where teams will put like the NCAA logo or the ACC, like where teams put their conference logo. I mean, not NCAA, but the conference logo. I'd have the Golden Dome. I'd have the Golden Domes right there. That's what I would do. I think that'd be freaking sweet. But I have no clue if Notre Dame is considering that, and I doubt that they would. I think them adding ND to midfield was like a big thing for people at Notre Dame. So, but they've had it in the end zones before in the past. Whatever. It's not something that they're interested in now. Here we go, Ryan. From Dome or Grizz, what made Tommy Tremble such a good blocker, and can Michael Mayer become that kind of run blocker to go with his receiving prowess? If so, what a combo that would be.
Well, I think what made Tommy such a good blocker, is one that he had the willingness, right? Like he was a tenacious kid. Also, what I think really made him a little step up of a blocker, honestly, Brian, is I think that he could do it for multiple alignments, right? Like it wasn't just like good inline blocker, but that's just the only spot he's good at it. You could line him up at fullback, you line up at H, and he just had the willingness to it. The technique was good, right? Like aiming points are a big thing. Keeping a good pad level, coming to balance before you block, like all that stuff's really important. But I think more than anything, he had the physicality aspect to him and he had the willingness, and he was a guy that was a versatile blocker. You can move him all over the formation as a player.
TB12 for Heisman. What is Notre Dame's shot with Richard Young now that he has scheduled an official visit for Notre Dame?
I'll leave it at this. I've already reached out to Smitty, Brian Smith, that does some stuff for us. Richard Young does not talk to media. He hasn't for 2 years. That's the point blank period to it. He released a top 7 schools pretty recently, and Notre Dame was not a part of those top 7 schools. So him getting an official visit is shocked me. Honestly, I don't know if it shocked you, Brian, but I was like, oh, that.
I just put a long list of 23 and 24 players that I want you guys to start really focusing on, and he was not on that list. So
right. Yeah. Honestly, like he even follows me on Twitter, but like he hasn't replied. Obviously, every media person I've talked to about him, he's not a media guy. And apparently his coach is not very willing to talk to media either. So I don't know what to make of it, to be honest with you. I think it's still a long shot. Obviously, I don't know what has kind of happened that has kind of maybe flipped the script, or at least made him interested to check out the campus. It's
I know
great
what's
either
happened.
Way.
I know what's happened.
Fair.
2 words. Fair. Marcus Freeman.
That's fair. I meant it in a very short amount of time, but either way, yes. This is the point blank to this. Do I think they're going to get Richard Young? No, I don't. It's going to be a very massive long shot. The fact that they got him on campus though is pretty substantial, man. Like that's interesting, because we always talk about recruiting a lot is perception, right? You don't think that other recruits right now are being like, wow, they got Richard Young to go to campus. That's crazy. And he wasn't even in his top 7 schools. I think that matters, even if they don't end up getting
Big
Richard
time.
Young.
Because right now he's got visits set up to Oklahoma on the 3rd, Georgia on the 17th, Ohio State on the 24th. Now he's coming to Notre Dame the 13th, so I imagine like he'll probably maybe be somewhere else that weekend. But he's got 4 of his 5. So that means between Texas A&M, between Alabama, between Oregon and Florida, somebody's getting left out. Those are his other finalists in this top 7. So, look, I agree with Ryan. I don't think Notre Dame has much of a shot. But at this point in time, with the combination of Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and Dylan McCullough and Tommy Reese, if you can get – I've always felt this, even with the previous staff. If you can get a kid on campus, you got a shot. So the fact that he's using one of his 5 officials, because what he said in the tweet, I just went back and looked at it again just to make sure I read it correctly. He said Notre Dame OV. So it's an official.
It is.
And so he's using one of his 5 on Notre Dame. I would say going into those 5 visits, Notre Dame's 5th.
Right.
But that's better than where they were on, what was it, April 10th when he released his top 7, where they weren't a part of. And you got to respect the relentlessness of this staff, Ryan, that they just don't give up. It's a 5-star running back that didn't include you in your top 7 and doesn't talk much, and they're just still on him. And I was going to visit, so I don't think they're going to have much of a shot. But the reality is they've given themselves – they're in the game.
Right.
And that's with this staff and with what the Notre Dame campus has to offer, because look, maybe he's looking for an NIL deal, but kids who have zero presence really on social media and don't like talking to media are kids that aren't thinking a lot about my brand. Right. Sure. And so he's a kid that clearly likes something about Notre Dame. And so he's going to visit. So am I going to be optimistic, or are we going to write a million if Notre Dame gets Richard Young stories? No, unless somebody tells us, hey, we got a shot with this kid. But I just think it's impressive that they're getting this kid on campus. And look, this staff is going to get involved with kids they usually won't have a shot at, and some they're going to get, a lot they're not going to get. As I've always said, it's like 2 to 3 kids a year is the difference. And this kid could be one of them, right? And, it's impressive to get on campus. But I think your point, Ryan, is the perception of this, at the very least, is going to have an impact on other prospects.
And I'll say this: somebody already asked us in the message board. Well, you're in a good spot. Obviously, you have Cedric Irvin Jr. Jaden Lamar seems like he's favoring Notre Dame leading up to his decision day. If you already have those two in the class, would they still take Richard Young? Would it be a take? And my answer is yeah. Yeah, he would 100%. Because I've been down on this running back class, right? Like we've talked about some of the running backs I think are a little overrated in this class. Richard Young's not one of them.
There's two that we always talk about. Like there's two, like Ryan and I have had this conversation. Like, it's just not a great running back class. We'll compare it to 2024, and it's already a better class. But at the beginning of that conversation, there's always 2 exceptions to our conversation, with the exception of, and it's Richard Young and Cedric Baxter. Those are the 2 that are the exceptions. Those are dudes. They're dudes in any class. But after that is where there's a drop-off, in my opinion. Like Justice Haynes, he's a good running back. Mm-hmm. I saw, I think it's On 3 has him as a top 25 player. He's not that, right? He's not that. He's a top 100 guy, at bottom of the top 100 guy. Very good back. I'd have taken him at Notre Dame. But this is a kid that, to me, is a top 30 back, top 30 player in a year. Cedric Baxter, I feel the same way about. I don't know if I think you agree with that, because I always throw that preface out and you've never argued with me about it. But those are the 2 kids I look at and say, those are dudes. After that, good players, but no great players. Yep. And you take
Richard Young's a dude, man. Richard Young is a dude. And yes, if you have 2 other running backs in the class, you still take Richard Young. That's why they're recruiting Richard Young. Like they're just going to keep recruiting him. He's one of those guys that even if you're full at a position and he's still going to talk to you, you're going to keep talking to him. It's just the point blank to it.
No question. Jordan Schreiber says, how do you think the Notre Dame offense would have performed under Chip Long if Brian Kelly had been completely hands-off? About the same. Because part of the reason Brian Kelly didn't like Chip Long is Chip Long didn't listen to Brian Kelly. Just fact. That's why he didn't like him. Because Chip would listen to him to a degree, and he'd let Brian Kelly say what he wanted to say. But when he got into games, if he wanted to call something, he's going to call something. So, I mean, it maybe been a little bit better, because Brian Kelly being hands-off would have meant Chip Long would have been allowed to hire the offensive line coach he wanted to hire after Harry left. And so I think the offense would have been better in that regards. He would have hired is Joe Gilbert, right? Who's now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, won a Super Bowl as the offensive line coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's who Chip Long wanted to hire. And if he wasn't going to hire him, he wanted to hire Bob Bostad, who is now the offensive line coach of Wisconsin, who was the original O-line coach that really built Wisconsin up before he went to the NFL to coach O-line, came back to Wisconsin. They already had an O-line coach. He coached linebackers. To tell you the kind of coach he is. He's been the guy coaching all these stud linebackers they've had the last recent years. He went from building Wisconsin to having – being in the O-line U conversation to now every year they're producing some linebacker no one's ever heard of until Bostad coaches them up and they become dudes. Like your boy, one of Ryan's favorite draft prospects this year is Leo Chanel. Understandably so. Well, I mean, he's very well coached. Not only is he talented, but he's very well coached. And so those are the 2 that Chip wanted. And if Brian Kelly would have been hands off, he would have let Chip hire that guy, and the staff would have been better. And the offense would have been better. That would have where the impact would have been. But the O-line situation and the fact that Chip often ignored Brian Kelly were the reasons Brian Kelly had to get rid of Chip Long, despite the fact they had their highest scoring output since Brady Quinn was a quarterback his last season. So clearly it was a Chip Long problem, right? All right. Let's see here.
I always liked Chip Long, by the way.
I
did
still
like
do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jordan Schreiber, I know it's still early, but any idea on how you think Notre Dame would match up with Alabama or Georgia in the playoff next year?
I mean, you started it off, Jordan. It's way too early for that. I mean, I need to see exactly what everything looks like on paper, right? I mean, the Alabama and Georgia that we saw last year is not going to be what it is this year. I mean, Georgia, I think this is safe to say, and I could be completely wrong about this. I think Georgia's going to take a pretty significant step back. Like, they're not going to be what they were last year. Like, that was a anomaly, in my opinion, right? Like, I think they're still going to be a 10. They're going to be a double-digit win team and contending for an SEC championship, but they're not going to be a defense that allows, 11 points a game or some crazy number. Like, it was a ridiculous number, right? So I think both teams are going to be very good because they are historically. I think that what Notre Dame has, I don't want to say an advantage, but one spot that I think I feel better about than I would historically against an Alabama or Georgia is that I think that both teams' secondaries are not going to be as good as they have been in year past, at least at the cornerback position, right? So if Notre Dame's wide receivers take a step forward, which I think they will, I think that you match up better against Kool-Aid McKistry and even Akili Ringo, even though he's very talented, but like he needs to take a massive step forward. Like, the cornerback positions at both teams are not quite as good. So it's the thing where, like, I think it's not a traditional matchup. Like, it's not what we would typically think of as Notre Dame having disadvantages in certain spots, but I have to see it on paper before I give you a complete analysis on it.
I think for me, I think Alabama's going to take a step back offensively this year, but I think they're going to be a lot better on defense because I think the front seven is still going to be really good, especially if they're able to find a way to get Will Anderson and Dallas Turner on the field together, which I think that they will. So I think they'll be better on – I don't say a lot better. I think they're going to be better on defense this year because I think last year, one of the things that hurt them late in the year last year is something that's going to help them this year, and that is a lot of the guys that were not good DBs were hurt by the end of the year, which allowed younger guys to get opportunities to play. They got Eli Ricks, but I don't trust that kid to, as far as I can throw him. He's a talented kid, but you don't know if he's going to be suspended or just not be in his right mind or a very immature kid. But I agree with your point. That's an area where I think Notre Dame can have some success, and they're going to have a heck of a time covering Michael Mayer because none of their safeties are great cover guys, in my opinion, especially against a guy like Michael Mayer. It comes down to is Notre Dame's offensive line as good as we think, and can Tyler Buckner make plays? That's what's going to come down to for me. I think Notre Dame's defensive line can have success in this game because I think Notre Dame's defensive line in 2022 is going to be better than their defensive line was in 2020, and that 2020 defensive line more than held its own against Alabama. And this is going to be a better Notre Dame D-line and not as good of an Alabama offensive line, in my opinion. So I think there's some matchups where Notre Dame has some advantages. Can they pressure Bryce Young, and can they create big plays on offense? Those are going to be the questions in that kind of matchup. Georgia, I think, is a matchup that I think would bode well for Notre Dame. I actually like the Georgia matchup better than I do like the Alabama matchup, just because at the end of the day, I mean, who are you more concerned about, stopping Stetson Bennett or stopping Bryce Young? And I'm more concerned about stopping Bryce Young. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually think Ohio State's a tougher matchup for Notre Dame this year than Georgia would be. That's just my 2 cents. We're talking about this before you get on the show. Look, I know the 15 draft picks and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is Georgia had talent, but that was not a great team. It was a really good team. They played no one in the regular season. The first good team they played in the regular season, if you can count the title game as a regular season, was Bama, and Bama destroyed their defense. Because they didn't have a great pass. They didn't have a great pass defense. It's just they only played one team that could do any damage on them. That was Tennessee. But by the time they got to the second quarter, Tennessee was down to like one of their top 4 or 5 receivers. And so I was not as in love with that defense compared to other people. It was really, really good. I'm talking about the thoughts of one of the greatest defenses of all time, and all this other kind of stuff. Right. And because how many of the guys that got drafted high were like, wow, that guy got overdrafted. That guy got overdrafted, right? I mean, so that doesn't mean they weren't really good. It's just like this wasn't Miami 2001, right? That was not that. No. And so, I think, and you lost all those guys. And now I think but again, this goes, does Tyler Buckner take a step? Do the receivers take a step? Is the line as good as we think? Can they cover people in the secondary? Like, there's a lot of questions. All of what I just said is dependent on all those things being answered in the affirmative. Right. And so that would be my my 2 cents.
Good call on the Tennessee game, by the way. Hendon Hooker actually had a really good start against Georgia that game. He looked pretty good early.
Once that, because they had one of their top receivers was still playing, and once he went down, which was like late first, early second quarter, I mean, it was a lot tougher. He still passed for over 3 bills in that game. It was some chunk plays. They weren't quite as good, but yeah, I mean, there were opportunities there to be had, and there were other chances they could have had plays, but the pass rush just got to them, and that won't happen, I think, this year because there's no Trayvon Walker. There's some of the guys they had last year. They're really good at rushing the quarterback, aren't they? And I know Nolan Smith is back and he's really good and all that, but
they have him and they have Jalen Carter, who's a dude. Yeah. But like other than that,
they had him last year too, along with the other guys that are now in the NFL, and that's kind of my point.
Sure.
Adam Anderson was out by that time, correct?
Yeah, I think he only played like the first 5 or 6 games. I mean, that kid was so good. It's a shame he did what he did, but that
he was accused of. I'll still give him the innocent till proven guilty, but it sounds pretty bad.
It sounds really bad. Yep.
John Ev with a super chat. This is a good one. You get to take one player from any Notre Dame team, past or present, and add him to any Notre Dame team from 2000 to 2021 range to win a championship. Who do you take as your difference maker?
Wow.
I still say, like, I still am going to go with there's 2 options. If I can take someone that signed with Notre Dame, I'm putting Randy Moss in there, right? But if you got to take from a guy that actually played, for me, Ryan, I'm going with I would still say bring Justin Tuck back in 2005. And that's a simple one. That's not even like taking Isaiah Foskey from now back to then. I'm just saying take Justin Tuck from the 2004 team and let him play his final year, because I think it was his 5th year. He left after his senior year, but he had another year of eligibility left, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I would say you put Justin Tuck on that 2005 team. They lost in overtime to Michigan State. I don't think that happens. And they lost late against USC, which I don't think happens if Justin Tuck plays. And so when I see that, I said, boy, I would have loved to have seen what that team could have done with Justin Tuck at defensive end. Opposite Victor Abimiri with Trevor Laws and Derek Landry on the inside. That would have been a fun team to watch. That'd have been a fun team to watch.
Was it the 2017 team, the one that you said you thought could win a championship? Was that the one?
They had a better quarterback, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take Brady Quinn. I'm going to dump him into 2017. Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I don't know if he would have been the type of quarterback that I would have liked to have seen. I think I might have taken like a more of a mobile guy, like maybe a Jarius Jackson, because again, that team was going to run the football a ton.
Sure.
And, I would say, here's what I'll cheat and say. Give me Brady Quinn as the quarterback, and then I'm going to cheat and take a position coach. I'm going to give him a new receivers coach. All right. Can I do that? Because then you'd have had someone that would have decided to play Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool instead of Cam Smith and Freddie Canteen in a game they lost by 1 point to Georgia. Is that fair? Can I cheat and do that?
That's fair.
No,
I'll give that to you.
I think that 2017 team with better quarterback play would have been really, really tough to beat. And I mean, the 2015 team is one where there's not players I would change out. There's coaches I would change out, because I thought that team, the roster, like Sean and I talk about this all the time. And like the 15 players are like, man, if Malik doesn't get hurt and Torian doesn't get hurt, and I'm like, forget that. If they still got hurt and you had better coaches, you still win a title that year, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, Malik got hurt. That was before Deshaun kind of lost his way. But, I mean, you lost Torian, you still had CJ Prosise and Josh Adams, right? I mean, it was a coaching problem. That was about as loaded of a team as Notre Dame is going to have. It was a coaching issue. And, that to me is something that you look at and say, boy, if that team would have had better coaching, they might have been a problem for a lot of people. And, I'll stick to that one. So these are fun questions. They really are. They're very fun questions. Like here's one for you, Ryan. What if the 2020 team had the 2018 corners? Julian Love and Troy Pride.
Instead of, what was it, Nick McLeod?
And I mean, Tariq Bracy.
Yeah.
And then he got benched for Clarence Lewis, true freshman Clarence Lewis.
Yeah, it's a lot better of a team.
Yeah,
you're not wrong.
I mean, those and put any top quarterback on some of those teams, like the 2018 team. What if the 2018 team had a better quarterback?
It's fair. It's fair. Yeah.
So that's one where I'd put Brady Quinn on, that one right there.
2018.
Because here's why: the overall roster would have been different with Brady, because Brady had his own version of Samardzija and Stovall in 2018 with Chase Claypool and Miles Boykin. Right? I mean, that's what he liked to do. He liked to throw those back shoulders and all that stuff. He would have thrown those deep balls that Ian wasn't throwing against Clemson. He would have thrown those. Brady was not afraid to throw those passes.
No, Brady was not afraid to throw a football. Yeah. Man, he had some conviction every deep ball he threw. I mean, how many Duvall Kamara highlights were just him chucking the ball up deep to Duvall Kamara? As he went. I mean, not Duvall Kamara. I mean,
Jeff Samardzija.
No, I wasn't even talking about
Samardzija.
Mo Stovall. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why. I just both 6'5" and long.
Right.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yep.
Duvall Kamara.
Yep.
Whoops.
Yeah. No, you had to go with the Jersey guy. I get it. I completely understand. Always,
man. You got to give him and Theo Riddick and all the dudes some love. Gotta happen.
But I mean, if you look at that 15 team though, for example, they had 8 kids, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 kids drafted that next year from that team. 2 first rounders, 2 second rounders, 2 third rounders, a 4th rounder. The next year, starters from that team went in the 2nd round and the 7th round. And then the next year, 2 starters from that team went in 1st, 4th, and 6th. And then in 19, you had a starter from that team go in the 1st round. So that 15 team had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first-round draft picks on it. Now, they weren't all first-round draft picks at that time. Like Jerry Tillery wasn't a first-round draft pick in 2015, but he was still a talented player that started on that football team as a true freshman. But you had Ronnie Stanley, Will Fuller were first-round picks, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey were first-round picks. I would argue that they did play like that kind of guy. I thought Mike McGlinchey's best year was still 2015 as a right tackle. I still think that was his best year at Notre Dame. And, of course, you had Ronnie Stanley. And then, of course, then you had guys like Durham Smythe, who was a 4th-round pick. You had Jalen Smith. That's another one. Jalen Smith would have been a first-round pick if it's not for the knee injury.
Yeah.
Right? And they wouldn't have been playing in the Fiesta Bowl if they had a better coaching staff. Another way that Brian Van Gorder ruined Jalen Smith's career, because they weren't playing in the right game. Nick Martin, 2nd-round pick. Kavari Russell's 3rd-round pick. CJ Prosise, 3rd-round pick. Like, the amount of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd-round picks that team had on their roster in 2015 is absurd.
Was Nick Martin was the 2nd-round pick, really?
Yep. Of the Houstons, He went 50, 51, 50, 51.
Interesting.
He was Nick Martin, 19th pick of the 2nd round.
I knew he was pretty early, but I thought he was a little lower. That's pretty crazy. Wow.
Yep. Went 51st. Kavari Russell was a 3rd-round pick that year. CJ Prosise was a 3rd-round pick. Sheldon Day was a 4th-round pick. So that team had so much NFL talent. And Romeo Okwara didn't get drafted off that team, but he was a starter in the NFL for multiple years, had a year with over 10 sacks in the NFL. It doesn't even include him. Matthias Farley started for the Colts for an entire year, and he was a backup on that team.
Romeo Okwara has been a quietly good football player in the NFL for a while now.
Yep. So that team was absolutely loaded. So yes, give me a quarterback on that 18 team, or a better coaching staff on that 2015 team, or, as I said at the beginning, give me Justin Tuck on that 2000. In the spirit of this right here, you give me Justin Tuck on that 2015, on that 2005 team. If he comes back, that would have been a lot of fun. B. Straw, why do you think schools have started moving official visits to May, June? You would think the schools would want to save them for a big game week and show the kids the big game atmosphere. Ryan, can I just quickly address this one? Because most kids are going to be committed by then. And if you wait till then, you're going to be out of the game with a lot of kids. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yep.
Right? Plus, here's nothing. As a coach, practically, I can't give you nearly as much attention when you're on campus for a game weekend. That's why schools are now moving game weekends up to when they're juniors, and then bringing them officials for when they're over the summer. Here we go, Ryan. Cricky says, give me your dream class. You finish out the rest of the commitments, and you don't have to mention the QB. We don't mind. It's not like he's like, Lord Voldemort, who's, the name we don't speak of. It's just, I'm not going to update his recruitment until there's something new, and there hasn't been anything new that I've heard other than him taking some visits. There's nothing new compared to everything that's reported about. I'm just kind of tired of covering that part of it. I don't mind talking about him, and he's definitely a must get. So, Ryan, to answer the question, give me your dream finish. Let's say Notre Dame can get no more than 26.
Okay. Are we still keeping
like every kid on the board, and they signed 37 kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Are we still keeping this semi-realistic, or can I give them Richard Young at running back?
I mean, dream finish of something you think is realistic, right? But I mean, look, the kid's freaking visiting officially. That's here's my thing, Ryan. If a kid's going to take an official visit to Notre Dame, I can't tell you it's not realistic they're going to get him. Do I think they're going to get him? No, I don't. But it's realistic. He's visiting. He's going to make an official visit. So, yeah, you can include him if you want.
Sure. All right. Well, I'm gonna say I'm not gonna include him because I think it's unfair. Okay. I'm gonna say I'm probably actually gonna start on defense here. Let's start on defense. Dream class. Caleb Downs is added to the safety room with Adon Schuler and Peyton Bowen. Cornerbacks. Give me Micah T's one spot. Give me Micah Bell at the other, and I'm going to take 3 corners in this class, Brian, because I can. So in that sense, I'll take Christian Gray. All right, as my top 3 corners there. Linebackers, I'm only going to take one. Well, actually, let me revive. All right, Jay Nosberry.
Are you paying attention to the numbers?
No, not really. Not really. Okay. I'm not going to get the 37 though. I promise.
You know you only have 85 scholarships to work with. Right?
Yes, I know. I'm don't worry. I'm good here. I'm good. All right. So Jay Nosberry is a yes. I'm going to leave it just at that one linebacker for now. Okay. I'm just going to leave it there. Defensive line, Jason Moore is the last guy in that group. Offensive line, we have to get Monroe Freeling, Charles Jagasaw. I almost call him Jagusa. And let's who am I missing there? We already have Pendleton. You already have Sullivan Absher. Do we want a 5th offensive lineman? I'm going to skip out on a 5th offensive lineman for numbers' sake. I'm going to skip out on a 5th offensive lineman. Tight end, you already have your tight end. Wide receivers, Rodney Gallagher, Jaden Greathouse. Do I want to take a 4th? Yeah, I want to take a 4th, but do I want to include Ronan Hannafin as a wide receiver or take him as an athlete? I'll just include Ronan Hannafin as a wide receiver there. He's the 4th one on there. And then I'm going to flip the script a little bit. Dante Moore obviously isn't a quarterback. I'm going to say I want Jeremiah Love as a running back, and then I will take Samuel Mpemba as an athlete.
Okay. So Ryan, his dream class is 39 kids. So
it was not 39. It was not 30.
So you got Dante, Jeremiah Love. Did you say Jade Lamar?
I did not say Jade Lamar. Okay. I left him out of this one.
And you said 3 receivers, right? Gallagher, Greathouse, and then Hannafin.
Correct.
And you had 2 offensive linemen, right? Mm-hmm. And then Jason Moore. Then Jordan. You had Mpemba as an athlete. Then you had Jaden Osbury as a
linebacker.
Then you had 3 DBs.
4 DBs, 3 corners, and then 1 safety.
Okay, so you went 14.
Yep.
Okay.
So 27 wasn't that bad.
Okay. Yeah.
Got to 27.
All right. I'm going to stick at 26, but it's going to be very similar. Dante Moore, quarterback. I know that the staff does not agree with me, but I would take Jeremiah Love over Jade Lamar. That would just my 2 cents.
I don't disagree.
I would take 3 receivers. It would be Rodney Gallagher, Jaden Greathouse, and Ronan Hannafin. And at offensive line, I would only take 2 because I get in my dream scenario Monroe Freeling and Charles Jagasaw commit to me in June, so I don't need to, or in late June, early July, so I don't need to take a 5th guy. Defensive line, Jason Moore. I'm taking Jaden Osbury. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I'm taking Jaden Osbury. I'd go Samuel Mpemba as an athlete, but like linebacker, DN kind of guy. And cornerback, it's very similar. I'm going Micah Bell. I'm not going Christian Gray. I'm going 2 corners and 1 safety. So I'm going 3 DBs. I'm going Micah Bell. I'm going Calvin Simpson Hunt. And then I'm taking Caleb Downs as my safety. That'd be my dream finish. Wow. You can either have Caleb Downs or you can have Richard Young. Take one or the other, and I'm taking Caleb Downs.
I would do that too. Yeah. 100% do that. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, the corner conversation was interesting. I was almost just going to stick to 2, but
because my thing is numbers wise, they're actually good numbers wise. They need some impact players. And so I would only take a 3rd guy if it was like a really like high level guy. And I just, I don't know or if it was a guy that could play somewhere else. Like if Micah T's wanted to be my 3rd corner, I'd take him and give him a shot at receiver if he wanted it. That would be that'd be my dream finish. That would be my dream finish.
So you ended up what 26?
26.
26.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because I didn't take a 5th offensive lineman.
Right. I didn't either. I just took the extra corner. Yep.
Yeah. That's mine. So that's a good one. That's a very good one. I like questions like that. They're fun, especially for mailbags. John A1 asks, which quarterback do you project to have better Notre Dame career, Dante Moore or Tyler Buchner?
I would say Dante Moore, I guess. I mean, it's an interesting conversation. It really – actually, let me rethink this. Yeah, I'm still gonna go Dante Moore because I like him a little bit better than Tyler Buchner coming out of high school. Like I don't think it's by a ton. I just think it's a little tiny bit. So, and he's going to walk in to a better coaching staff off the get go, right? Like that's the difference for me. So I think Buchner's going to have a great career. I would just slightly take Dante Moore for that instance.
For me, I'm going to go Dante Moore for a little bit of a different reason, and that is simply that I think he's going to have better players around him. I mean, just top to bottom, I think he's going to have better players around him. Tyler Buchner's going to have very good players around him, but I mean, we're seeing what this coaching staff's putting together. Is they can just keep the majority of staff together for 2 to 3 years, just the majority of it. This team is going to be loaded. So I'd probably go Tyler Buchner. Just because of that. I also, looking at the schedules Dante's going to face, they're going to be tough, but not quite what I think this year and next year's schedules are going to be. That's also part of it as well. So, but I'm like halfway through that, and then I'm like, but man, Tyler Buchner's really dynamic. I mean, honestly, if I wasn't a little bit concerned about Tyler Buchner staying healthy, I might go with him because he's such a dynamic dual threat guy. And you know my stance on dual threat guys. I love dual threat quarterbacks. So that would probably be where I would go with that, Ryan, is I'm back and forth. If you ask me again tomorrow, I might change my answer. I'm very high on Tyler Buchner, but it just, I think Dante Moore, and part of this depends on, how long is Tom Marist going to be here? Because if Tom Marist is going to be here for 4 or 5 more years, then my answer changes. It's clearly Dante Moore because Dante better fits what Tommy's looking for. If let's just say hypothetically that Tommy Rees left after a year and they hired Jeff Lebby as the offensive coordinator, I'd switch it to Tyler Buchner because I think Jeff Lebby likes that real dynamic dual threat quarterback, right? So that's part of it as well, and at least as far as how I answer the question. DMND13, what are your thoughts on Brady Quinn suggesting we change the phrase from 4 to 40 to 4 for forever? I think that's not practical. I think it sounds cool, but 4 for 40 is practical. You're going to graduate when you're in your 20s. You're going to retire in your 60s, right? And then 4 for 40, 4 for forever. I mean, that's just like that's getting a little bit too you're a legend forever, and I don't know, just
too cliche.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summing it up. Summing it up.
I don't think why do we need to change it? Does it not?
I think
work?
Part of it is everybody's following it. Everybody's trying to steal it and all that, and I don't know. And I don't know. Exactly, I'm with you.
I don't like changing things unless it needs to be changed.
Right. Unless it's not working, and it's working.
Exactly.
And every kid you talk to brings that up. Ryan still brings that up with Notre Dame specifically. Ryan, you missed it. Did you see the beginning how our show started with the conversation of the World War II battleships?
No, I did not.
So John A1 is a Navy man, so he says Iowa would take it. So I'm gonna go with him on that because he's not only a man of history like I am, but he's also a Navy man. So I think he would have a better feel for that. So I'm glad that John agrees with me on that because, like I said, a smart Navy man's telling me that. So, I dig that. RJG Irving, confused by a top 200 ranking, more skill positions than top 200, and no line rated 201 might still be one of the best at his position. Is the rating pure athletic ability? I'd have to look at the numbers, RJ, but to just take the premise of what you're saying, I think a lot of it is just, honestly, it's what I've said to you all for years. The rankings are they're not about an honest assessment of who the best players are.
Right.
A lot of it's pizzazz. How many offensive linemen are going to be generating clicks for people?
Right.
Right. I mean,
let's be honest. Some of these people that are making the recruiting, the rankings, are they sitting down and are they grading every single player? I mean, it's a little bit of chaos, to be honest. So yeah, I would say the most honest thing that you can do is to watch a player's film and then give your own assessment on it. Like, Like the Joe Otting thing for me, right? Everyone's like, oh, 3-star. It's just like that kid's not a 3-star. Like he's not. I mean, it's just
I take him over Austin Cerebral every day of the week, and that's a top 200 ranked kid.
100%.
Like I think the thing for me too is I would say watch the film, listen to people you trust, us and others. Look at the offer lists and look at the ranking. Take them all in, right? Take them all in as part of your overall data points, right? And then say, okay, which of these factors is best reflective of what I feel about this kid, right? Well, this kid's ranked really high, but for some reason Notre Dame doesn't want him, Bama's not recruiting him, and Georgia's not going after him. Okay, well, that might tell you something, but he's ranked high. Like, remember the kid Kevin Pine a few years ago from he was like, Rivals had him as like a 5-star, and
it's like 6,
people going nuts. Like, why isn't Notre Dame offering this kid? And I'm like, because he's not good, right? Same reason Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, nobody else, Penn State, nobody else is offering him. You know, he's just not good, but he's ranked as a 5-star. Yeah, because Mike Farrell likes him. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so just I say take all the data, but then understand that the data can only tell you so much. It can't tell you that this is a 17-year-old kid who's 6'5", 240 now, but he's going to be 310 pounds when it's all said and done, right? Those things can't be projected. And so that's what I say is just don't obsess over the rankings, but don't ignore them either because they're fun. Number one, they're fun. If people look at them correctly, they're fun. And number two, the percentages of success rates does give you some sort of small tidbit of, okay, well, this kid has a chance to be good because of his ranking, but understand that that's not the end all be all. It shouldn't even be your number one thing on the priority list. And then the other thing too is properly understand rank of offers. And just because Bama offers a kid doesn't mean that shows that, well, he's an elite player, because Bama, like everybody else, has their strengths and has their weaknesses when it comes to evaluation. For example, if Iowa is making a Midwestern lineman a huge priority, you should rethink looking at his film again, right? Because I'll take Kirk Ferentz's evaluation of an offensive lineman over the guy that Georgia just hired, right? And over the guy that Bama had before, and Doug Marrone. The new Bama coach, I like what I see from him so far, right? I think he's a good coach. He did a great job at Kentucky, I think. Kyle Flood, I respected that guy's evaluations because he's one of the best in the business, right? So I look more for, okay, does this program have an opportunity, or does this program have a history of success at a position, right? And are those people, really looking at are those people still there? So I think those are the things that I would factor into that, right? And it's why I say look at those things a little bit more thoroughly.
Full context.
Yep. Josh Miller, do you see how Washington is a must keep? If Golden leaves, do we just upgrade Washington so we don't lose him?
I mean, again, I don't know enough about Al Washington from a pure defensive coordinator perspective. Like, I don't know how he would call a game, right? So I don't know what the impact would be. I would say you want to keep Al Washington, though. So if that's upgrading him to you mentioned somebody as a passing game coordinator on the offense side of football. Like if he wants to be a run game coordinator, as far as the defensive structure, yeah, I would consider it. There's no doubt about it. Cause I think that Al Washington not only is going to be a really good coach for Notre Dame, he's a dynamic recruiter. So yes, if it means upgrading him to a certain position, I would definitely consider it. There's no doubt about it.
In theory, right? This doesn't have to do with Al Washington. In theory, I do not promote assistant coaches to coordinator jobs to keep them somewhere. I don't. You saw that with Ohio State and Kerry Coombs. We saw this with Jimmy Lake at Washington. He kept getting promoted because they didn't want to lose him as a DB coach. But he wasn't a good defensive coordinator. He was solid, and he was a bad head coach. And now the program's a mess. But you did that because you couldn't lose an assistant coach that was doing a phenomenal job as an assistant coach. Jimmy Lake as a DB coach was elite, right? Elite. But now you don't have him, and your program's a hot mess because you kept promoting him to jobs he wasn't capable of. We've seen that with other guys. I think that's kind of what happened with Gene Chizik. Gene Chizik did a really nice job as a D coordinator, and it resulted in him getting a head coaching job, right? And yeah, he got a national title because he got Cam Newton, but look what he did in every other year he didn't have Cam Newton, right? I mean, we see this all the time with coaches getting promoted because they were really good at one thing doesn't mean you're going to be good at the next thing. That's in theory. So to specifically now Washington, if he's got the chops for the job and Marcus Freeman has the chops for the job, then you flat out promote him if Al Golden leaves, flat out. But only if he has the chops for the job. Now, if you think he's got some strengths, but I'm not sure if he can run the whole defense by himself, then like Ryan said, hire him a pass game coordinator that maybe can help him in an area where he's not as strong, right? I'm cool with that. But yes, I would love to make sure that you do what you can to keep out Washington. But you also have to understand is, do you make that move knowing that a good year from Al Washington means he's probably head coach somewhere? That could be a negative. It could be a positive. Hey, let's let these guys run this defense for a year, and because we can win with them, and we know that Al's going to be a head coach next year, and then I can go out and do something different. That may be part of the conversation too. But look, if a guy's got the chops to be a coordinator, I don't really care that he's ever done it before. So I don't care about his experience. But if Marcus Freeman feels like, boy, this guy can call a defense. We saw how he worked during pregame. We saw the suggestions he would make in game. Like, he has a knack for this. Yeah, promote him. I'm totally fine with that. And give him a big pay raise to make sure you can keep him as long as possible. Because the more money you pay him as a D coordinator, the more head coaching jobs he'll turn down to stay until the right head coaching job comes along. So Venables, we've seen other coaches in the past. And I have a feeling Al Washington's one of those guys that understands the value in taking the right job. Every coach should know this. Take the right job, not just a job. Just because it's a head coaching job doesn't mean it's better than your current situation as a coordinator deal as a position coach, right? So that would be part of it as well. But it's a very interesting scenario. But I understand why people want to have that happen, right? Because he is. I mean, in 5 months, he's absolutely crushed so far his job, and not just with. I mean, I thought the D line looked really good in the blue gold game. I mean, just across the board, the technique was improved, the motor was improved. The D line played really well. So I think even there, he's doing really, really well.
They were flying around. That whole defense was flying around. It was impressive.
Tyler Evans says, what team would like Notre Dame to play that you would like Notre Dame to play that they never played before, also home and home format?
They've never played before. Wow. Man, I need like a word bank of all the teams that they haven't played before,
Yeah.
like in front of me.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now to see some teams that they've never played before. I'm going to go through here. There's a site called Winsipedia, which lists all the teams they've played. It's a really cool site. I really like it. But let's go through. Let's see here. The ACC, Big 10, Big 12. Okay, Big 12, they've played Texas and Oklahoma. TCU, they've played once. I didn't know they played TCU. I forgot about that. When did they play TCU? 1972. All right. That would be why I forgot about it, because it was before I was born. I probably never actually knew about it.
Here's one. Apparently Notre Dame has never played Auburn.
No, I don't really care about SEC teams.
I'm just saying they're pretty substantial.
Yeah, they've played Arkansas. Here's interesting. The SEC teams they've never played. They've never played Arkansas, which will change soon because they have a home and home set up with them. They've never played Auburn. They've never played Mississippi State. They have played Ole Miss twice. They actually lost to Ole Miss one of the years that they won a title. I think the year that Dan Devine won a national title, I think they lost to Auburn or Ole Miss early in the year. They've played Georgia 3 times, 0-3. Pac-12, they've played just about everybody in the Pac-12, I believe. Yep, everybody in the Pac-12. They've played 10 SEC teams. So who haven't they played? They haven't played Mississippi State. They haven't played
Kentucky.
Auburn. They've never played Kentucky. See, that would be one. That would be one. Because just the regional aspect of it. It wouldn't do a whole lot for you, but I wouldn't mind seeing a home and home with Kentucky. They're a regional team.
That's fair.
And then what about the Big Ten? Who haven't they played in the Big Ten? So let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They've played everybody in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. So it's only the SEC is really the only league that there's teams that they haven't played before. Let's see.
That's crazy.
There's got to be Big 12. Has to be something in the Big 12. Who are we missing they've never played Kansas State before.
They've never played Kansas State.
There's one more team in the Big 12 that they haven't played, and I'm trying to figure out who it is. They've played Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. They've never played Texas Tech, and I could not care less about playing Texas Tech or Kansas State, to be completely honest with you. So I guess Auburn, there's tradition there. Getting to play in the plains and all that would be cool. I think Kentucky would be pretty cool too. That's about it. I have zero interest in going to Starkville for a football game.
How about if I can cover the game, can I go to Myrtle Beach when they play Coastal Carolina?
There you go.
Can we make that happen?
There you go. Sure. You can drive down if you want. I'm not paying for it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
That's fine.
That's
fine.
We'll do that.
I'll do that.
We'll do that. We can do that. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Good question. I'm actually, so part of the reason that we postponed today's show as far as a topic is I'm still working on putting our schedule together. And one of the things we're going to do early on is we're going to kind of break down the schedule, but then we're going to have some fun shows too. And one of them is going to be like, what are some teams you'd like to see Notre Dame play? And it could be teams they've played before. What would be your ultimate Notre Dame schedule? So we're going to have some interesting, fun conversations when it comes to that. Jordan Schreiber says, how do you think the Buckeyes O-line is going to play under their new coach this year, Ryan?
I mean, I don't think it'll be worse than last year. Last year was pretty bad, to be honest. I think that getting Paris Johnson at maybe his more natural position at left tackle, I like the upside of him. I mean, he's a really talented player. DeJuan Jones, if he can keep his weight in check, then I like him as well. But man, he was just playing way too heavy last year. Like he was just a little slow-footed last year, playing at like 360 plus. So, and I like the center, Whippler, right? Whippler, whatever his name is. Yeah. Luke Whippler. He's a good football player. So I think it'll be better. I don't think it's going to be great this next season coming up, but I think it'll definitely be better than last year. I mean, Nicholas Petit-Frere was not good last year. Thayer Mumford was awful last year. Like it was bad film. I think he ended up going in like the 6th round, and people were trying to project him as like a day 2 player. Like it was just not great film for Ohio State last year on the offensive line.
Here's the question. I have for you. Are you talking big picture throughout the season? Or are you referring to game 1?
So I was talking big picture. I was talking full season. Yeah.
Big picture, I agree with you. I think Justin Fry is a good football coach. And I think he'll have them going well. I also think that, to your point, I think you're spot on about Paris Johnson being they'll be better. Like Nicholas Petit-Frere, like you said, was not good last year.
Yep.
I still don't like the other kid at tackle. I think he should. I don't see it. I don't think he moves well enough. I don't see it.
He needs to lose like 30 pounds, man.
Like
heavy.
They probably have Matthew Jones at one of the guard spots. He's back, right? He'll probably be one. It's just not a super talented line, in my opinion, outside of Paris Johnson, in my opinion. Now, Luke Whippler's a really good college football player, but he's like a Nick Martin type of really good college football player in that he was technically sound, battle, he's good athlete, not really a great player. I mean, I think the point that I think your reaction to Nick Martin comment earlier is like, oh wow, 51, that's overdrafted him from where he should have been, right? And he hasn't been great with the Texans. He's not with the Texans anymore. So it's not a super talented line. But to the question, do I think they'll play? I think they'll be tougher. I think under Justin Fry, that's something he's done a really good job with at BC and UCLA. Those UCLA lines, Ryan, were physical. That's one thing you knew they were going to be. They were physical.
Oh yeah.
Now, will it be by game 1? We'll see. But I think they're going to be better this year. By the middle of the season, at least, they're going to be better than they were when this last season ended, in my opinion. I agree with you on that.
I'm just hoping that a 2 offensive line coach don't ruin Nicholas Petit-Frere coming out of high school and Paris Johnson coming out of high school, because that Paris Johnson kid was a freak coming out of high school.
Yeah, he was very good. And I think he was good last year. I just think some of this talk about him being a top 15 pick is like, well, hold on a second. Let's let him
we have to see him play tackle first, right? Like,
right. Let's see it a little bit. But I mean, they're going to be more athletic on the edge than they were last year, even if the other kid doesn't gain an ounce of athleticism. Because as you've said many times, and I agree with, Nicholas Petit-Frere was just not. He was not, as a senior in college, the kid he was in high school or early in his career, even. All right, so here we go. Let's see here. Here's an interesting question. If the 2018 defense and defensive coaching staff was matched with the 2009 Jimmy Clausen offense, how many games does Notre Dame win? Well, see, here's the thing. That 2009 Notre Dame offensive line was not good. And that's the problem. And they had talent. You had Golden Tate, you had Michael Floyd, you had Kyle Rudolph. I mean, they had talent, but the offensive line wasn't good. That was the problem. They were not a well-coached offensive line. But he did say, but here's my question. If you could give me the 2009 offense with maybe Harry Hiestand as the line coach, maybe we have the conversation, but I don't know if the winds change with Jimmy in that offense at quarterback because of the line. And I think they still would have gone 12-0 in the regular season, but how would they have fared in the playoff game against Clemson against that D line? That would be my concern. Right? Would the pass rush negate the advantage that they had on the perimeter? I mean, yes, they would have had an advantage. Michael Floyd and Golden Tate, I'm sorry, would have been an advantage over Trayvon Mullen and AJ Terrell. I mean, they were very good, but Michael Floyd and Golden Tate were better. but you got to have time to get those throws off. I don't know if they would have time to get those throws off.
That's fair.
So, but I think it would have been a more competitive game. I'll say that. I think they would have scored on Clemson a little bit. Would it have been enough to win? That I don't know. I will say this, however. I do believe this. If you could take the 2009 offense with Jimmy, if they can beat Clemson, which would be tough, I definitely think they beat Alabama. They would have shredded that Alabama defense. Shredded them. And I thought Notre Dame defense could have given Alabama's offense fits because Alabama would have had the same problem against Notre Dame they had against Clemson. They couldn't protect the quarterback. That's my 2 cents.
That Clemson 2018 team, that defense was silly, man.
Really good.
That was just crazy. So yeah,
it didn't even have Dexter Lawrence in the postseason. That's the crazy thing about it.
Nuts. Who went top 20 in the draft?
Right.
Right. Probably overdrafted a little bit, but yeah, to your point, yes, it was a incredible defense. So a immobile Jimmy Clausen against that defensive line
with the 09 offensive line. I don't and Frank Verducci coaching the O-line. That I would have been concerned with. But then you could have said just have Jimmy pinpoint some back shoulder fades to Michael Floyd and call a bootleg and let him launch one deep to Golden Tate. I'm like, all right, I get you enough points. Right? But it would have been a much more entertaining game. I will say that.
Oh, for sure.
There's no doubt about it. All right, let's get to some more questions here. I don't know if we have Brian Barry's. It says, don't forget about those Frostburg State studs, Brian. He is an alma mater. So the question was, who was the greatest player I ever coached? I didn't coach at Frostburg State or against Frostburg State. I played against Frostburg State once, and they beat us, and I'm not happy about that because it was our rival. We played them in Raven Stadium. The year after they filmed that stupid movie, The Replacements. That field sucked. But we got the ball back, a couple minutes left, drove down, got in field goal range. The kicker was my roommate, and he kicked the ball, and it landed closer to the pylon in the back corner of the end zone than it did the goalpost. True story.
I played at Frostburg for 1 year.
You did? I didn't know that.
Under Coach Rogish. Yep. I was there for 1 year. Then the shoulders gave out, and I came back home. Yep.
Ryan has been fired. So I did not know that. He did not tell me that. He pulled a George O'Leary. He did not tell me on his resume that he played at Frostburg State.
Beautiful campus, man. Right outside of West Virginia. It's beautiful out there. Beautiful.
I didn't know he went to my rival. I was going to have a conversation.
I was going to say you're a Salisbury guy. So that means you were a triple option guy, right?
Yeah, well, that's the story. They were my sophomore year. We were not, or my redshirt sophomore year we were not, and I started on that team, and then the next year went to the option, and but yeah, he George O'Leary'd me. So.
Oh, no, I did not. I told you I played in college before. I just didn't tell you.
You didn't say where.
It's fair.
All right, it's all good. I don't care. It's all. I'm just
a couple of Maryland guys, man. What are you gonna say?
Yeah, all good. DMND. Let's see here. DMND 13 with a depot line. When and how would you rotate guys? I'm assuming if it's like 1A, 1B, but you wouldn't. If there's a clear number one and then a drop off, would you give the 1B a series every 3 series or so? We'll take a first crack at that. Talking about just like if you have kind of like a 2017 situation where you have a couple guys that you kind of don't have a starter, but you have 2 guys that you feel you want to play.
Yeah. I think I would. I definitely wouldn't do it every series. I'm more of a, like, especially offensive line. I want guys to get in rhythm a little bit. So I think at 2 to 3 series, I think per guy would be a good starting point there. I hate yanking guys too quickly because I think, especially offense is such a rhythm and routine type of thing, right? Like a feel to the game. Like I hate just pulling guys so quickly. So yeah, I would say 2 to 3 series, then you get the rotation going. But I definitely do not like taking guys out too quick because I think it ruins the rhythm of the game.
I think it depends on – I'm good with a rotation if you have a set rotation. And it's what you practice and it's what you play. So, like, for example, in 2017, I think it worked at right tackle because, number one, you're on an island. And so it's a little bit – the communication is a little different. And number two, you knew what it was. It was Tommy, Robert. And if you got to a 2-minute drill late in a half, they both knew what was happening. No matter who had the previous series, if we get in a 2-minute situation, Robert's going in at right tackle. it'd have to be something like that, Ryan, where it's, what it is. It's every other series or every third series, whatever the case may be, they know what's going on. And we practice that way during the week. It's been that way in camp. It's been that way in practice. I think, to your point, because you don't want to mess up the groove. And so if you don't have a set situation that they know and that you're going to do, then I'm not doing it, right? And I'm not a huge fan of rotating offensive linemen, but I do think there are times when you have a solid veteran and a really talented young guy that, I want to get that younger guy some opportunities, but it can't just be, well, this is the right series to throw that guy in. It's got to be something where everybody knows going into the game on series number 3, so-and-so is going in. I think it has to be like that. Because to Ryan's point, the offensive line is different than receiving core, right? Where everybody's got to know what everybody's doing, but they're not necessarily working together as much, except for like mesh concepts. The offensive line, if one guy is throwing off the timing, the rhythm, the cadence, whatever, it can mess up your whole line. And so I think that is the important piece of, because I'm assuming that's your concern, Ryan, is in regards to bringing another guy in off the bench.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. DMND13, do you know which coach isn't on the road recruiting since Bowden was on the road? What are your thoughts on having Bowden on the road like that? I'm all for him being on the road when he can, and my understanding is Coach Heastan was in a wedding. That's why he was there. And I believe it was Tommy Kramer's wedding, but there might have been another one that he was a part of too, because some of his players are getting married. And I was actually sent a picture of Tommy Kramer's wedding. It was really cool. There's so many former Notre Dame players there. Like all the offensive linemen were there. They played for Coach Heastan. Ian Book was there. It was really cool to see all those guys, because you see, like, hey, these guys are brothers. I mean, they're not just teammates; they're brothers, right? And they're sharing each other's lives. You saw. Think about Hainsey was there, Eichenberg was there, Banks was there, Kramer was there, Brock Wright was there, Ian Book. Think about where all these guys live now. They're all NFL players. Aaron Banks, I think, did I say him? He was there. I think Colin Grunhard. These kids are living all over the country now. They came back for that moment. And then you see Coach Heastan there, who's like foot and a half shorter than everybody else in the picture. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see that,
I'm happy to see Tommy Kramer is locked on a little bit in the NFL after all his injuries. Very
healthy, finally healthy.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool deal. That's a pretty cool deal. All right, let's get to see if we have any more questions here. I know we got some starred ones. Let's see if some of those are good. We are not Marshall. Ryan, with the success that team from the north, we're talking to Michigan, had with their DNs, how do you see Foskey impacting the game at the shoe? It's a good one.
Yeah, and that is a good question. So in Notre Dame's defense, with Foskey being a Viper, he's playing to the weak side a ton, right? So it's not as easy to say, like, I'm going to take advantage of who the weaker offensive tackle is. I'm just going to put him against the right tackle all day. Like, you can't unfortunately do that. But I think that when you get those matchups specifically where he's able to go against the right tackle, DeJuan Jones, in obvious passing situations, I think he could have a huge impact, because that kid is a slow-footed guy. I think that the first step that Foskey has and the explosiveness that he has, I think he's going to be able to win outside track a ton. And you have Paris Johnson, who's very talented player. We've talked about it a little bit, but he's going to be a first-year starting left tackle for Ohio State. He's been inside a guard. So I think Foskey can have a big impact. I think the defensive end position just in general can have a big impact in the game, because one tackle, unless his weight is down, he's a little bit slow-footed, and you got a guy that's going to be starting his first game at left tackle for Ohio State. So I think he could have a huge impact.
I agree. I think the guy that could end up having the biggest impact is one of the other ends. Either Justin Ademilola or Riley Mills. The reality is Ohio State knows who Isaiah Foskey is, and they're going to have a game plan to try to keep him from taking over. Now, you can't double him the whole game unless you just want to completely expose yourself to other things. But they're going to have some things for him. That gets made very harder if Justin Ademilola or Riley Mills or both have a big game. So if you look at the ends in general, Notre Dame's ends have to make an impact. It's not just Foskey, and that's what I think what Ryan is getting at. If they're going to take him out of the game, then that's going to open up opportunities for Jason and Justin and Riley and those guys to make plays, and they got to step up and do it. And those are matchups I like. I think DeJuan Jones is going to have a really tough time playing at the same pad level that Justin Ademilola is playing at. I agree. I think he is. You know what I mean? Like, I think Riley Mills is going to give him some problems athletically, and if he gets matched up against Isaiah Foskey, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a big problem. Like I could see him getting up under his chest and just driving him right into the quarterback, just launching him onto CJ Stroud. I mean, we'll see if that ends up happening or not, but that would be my concern.
One-on-one matchups with Isaiah Foskey is not going to be fun times.
No. And that's what was so smart about what Cincinnati did last year. They just said it's not going to beat us. And they slid their protection. They chipped backs. They chipped tight ends. I mean, they had to play for the whole game. And then there's about 3 or 4 snaps that I can remember him not getting blocked. And guess what he did on those plays? You know what I mean?
Made some plays.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Yep.
Sean Ziegler says, Brian, could you discuss some of the dysfunction that went on behind the scenes during the 2016 season? Was BBG not liked amongst players, and same with Kaiser?
How long we got here, Brian?
I'll be real brief. Number one, Brian Kelly was such an absentee parent at that point in time. He was never around the team. He had no concept of what was going on in the program. We'll start just several things. The quarterback battle. Malik Zaire was the leader of that team the year before. And everybody just kind of thought he was going to get the job back. And Brian Kelly said the starting quarterback's going to be this, 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 and this, and this. And then Deshaun did none of those things or a few of those things. And Malik did all those things. And he still gave the job to Deshaun. It was very obvious in fall camp that there was some dysfunction on offense because of the way the quarterback battle was handled. Malik would have a great practice, and then all Brian Kelly would talk about afterwards was how great Deshaun was, right? It was clear during fall camp, too, that the offense was being geared towards what Deshaun does well, not towards what Malik does well. And that held the offense back. Brian Kelly gave Mike Sanford a lot more say in the offense that year and took some away from Mike Denbrock, which was a dumb move because Mike Denbrock did a really nice job the year before, and Mike Sanford's a bad football coach. But Brian Kelly didn't know that because Brian Kelly's not around. And so you have that was a problem. So you lost some really good players, and you had some skill. I mean, Equineme St. Brown and Kevin Stefferson and Torrey Hunter Jr. and CJ Sanders, like they had weapons. It just was there was no rhythm on that offense. It was a mess. But it was Mike Sam. It was just the players didn't know who the leader was. At quarterback, they didn't know who the leader was. They knew who the leader was on offense because you have Brian Kelly giving his input on what plays to call. You got Mike Sanford doing his thing. Got Mike Denbrock doing thing. I was told by players from that team, like, we would literally come off the sideline and BK would say something to us. And then Sanford and Denbrock would tell us 2 completely different things. And that would happen in practice. It would happen in film sessions where, like, Sanford would say one thing to his group, and then Denbrock would say something completely different to his group, and it was a mess. And it was usually Denbrock was the one that was right. That was just the offense. I mean, the defense was several things. Number one, the strength program was a mess. I've said this before. I warned people about the 2016 season many times. I got called a hater and all this other crap because I was told players were getting locked out of the gym. So they had to go get like memberships to like local gyms because they wouldn't have the gym open like all the time where players could come get work. They felt the strength program wasn't pushing them. We've had people verify that in the chat here. We've had people say, yeah, I worked at a gym and I'd see Tavon Coney and other players coming in all the time. It was a mess. Brian Van Gorder was despised by his players, and then they despised Brian Kelly for letting him stay around. And then, of course, Brian Kelly wasn't around. So there were so many problems with that football team. But it was head coach, quarterback, defensive coordinator was really at the root of all of it. And, that's kind of what did him in. Because if you think about it, that was one of the easiest schedules Notre Dame has had in Brian Kelly's tenure. They lost to a 3-9 Michigan State team, a 4-8 Duke team. They lost to freaking Navy. It was such a mess, man. It was such a mess. But I could do a whole show. I could do a week worth of shows on each of those topics. But it was just Brian Kelly just not giving a crap and not being around. And that's what it boiled down to. But it was bad. Lawrence Adams with a super chat. Thank you, Lawrence. I'd give BK 50% credit for a championship in the next couple of years, 25%. This is great. I love this. I was wondering where he was going to go with this. 25% for hiring Marcus Freeman and 25% for leaving. Just saying. Lawrence, I was really thinking, because I didn't read the whole question out, and I got to get better about doing that. But that is a great answer, Ryan. I don't know. Were you here for that part of the show about how much credit? If Notre Dame was a championship, how much credit would you give Brian Kelly? I think you were listening below. I'd love to hear your answer. But this is a great answer from Lawrence. 25% for hiring Marcus Freeman and 25% for leaving. Yeah, that is a great answer.
I couldn't really argue with you or Vince. I think Vince said 20, right? And then you said 25.
He said 20, yeah. I said 20 to 25, yeah.
Yeah, I would give him some because I mean some of the players on the roster over the next couple of years are still going to be guys that he recruited for the most part, and hiring Marcus Freeman is a substantial thing. So yeah, you have to give him a little bit of credit. You can't say zero.
Right. You have to give him. I mean, it just depends on how much credit do you want to give him for hiring Marcus Freeman. I think is really what it boils down to. That's what it boils down to. And I think it's a decent chunk. I think it's a decent chunk, to be honest with you. All right, let's get some more before we got to get out here. Joseph Salvatore, any comp between George Carlotphus and Owen Wafel?
No. I mean, look, Carlotphus was a little tight, just a semi, but he was a true edge rusher. Like he was physical profile, and he was a guy that speed to power convert, great hands. Everything was awesome in that respect. Owen Wafel is a guy that Wafel, I'm sorry, I called him Wafel. Owen Wafel is a guy that is going to be a pure interior guy, right? Like he's going to be one gap penetrating type of nose in that system. I think he has a lot of power to him. I think there's an upside to him, but I would say he's more Derek Landry than he is a George Carlotphus. George Carlotphus is a kid that just went in the first round, and he's a true defensive end. So I don't see that comparison.
I think the only thing I see is I think they both have really good motors. Really good motors. That's one area where I would compare them as well. Benji, 1801, Notre Dame just opened as 3.5-point dogs to USC. I love it. I love it. I didn't see that. I don't pay attention to that, but I love it. Keep the disrespect flowing. I'm sure Marcus Freeman is like, yes, thank you. I hope we're dogs to Clemson as well. I don't know if they are or aren't, but yes, I think that's good for Notre Dame. Matt McCarthy with Super Chat. Thank you, Matt, very, very much. It's nice to see Notre Dame recruiting in Massachusetts. What are your thoughts on Gearby Lambert? Bubakar's high school teammate. On3 ranked him as the number 12 overall. They have some weird O-line rankings. Number 12 overall in the 24 class also is Notre Dame in on Bronte Johnson. I'll say the latter, no, they're not. They're not recruiting. Even though he's from Fort Wayne, they're not recruiting him, and I think we all understand why. Ryan, have you had a chance to watch Gearby Lambert?
I have not. Okay. It's crazy though. Massachusetts back-to-back years having kids that rated that high. That's pretty insane. Go ahead. Yeah.
I like Gearby. He's really raw, but he's exactly what you'd think a 6'7", 285, 90-pound sophomore offensive line would be. Super long, pretty athletic when his technique is right, but his technique makes him at times look unathletic. But there's a lot of tools to work with. I mean, I think it's silly to rank sophomores, to be honest with you, in a top 100. But he is a guy that, take the rankings aside, he is a guy that absolutely needs to be high on Notre Dame's list because he is 6'7". He's got some athleticism. He's long arms. He's got some toughness to him for a sophomore in high school. He's a good football player. He's got a lot of potential. I don't know if he's necessarily a good football player yet. He's got a lot of potential, a lot of tools. I mean, if you're talking about starting an O-line class off with Peter Jones and him, that's a pretty darn good way to start. No, because I think Gearby's I'm curious to see when you get to watch this film, Ryan, what you think of him. But he's got left tackle tools to me with coaching, whereas Peter Jones is a right tackle guard guy for me. A big power player, right tackle guard kind of guy. That'd be a great way to start your 2024 class if you could. But I like him a lot. I mean, he's a guy that I think Notre Dame should prioritize, and I believe they are. I mean, Coach Heastand has been on him for a while, and they offered him very early in the process. I think it was on part of
they've only offered like 4 offensive linemen now, right?
It's like
something
him,
like
Peter Jones, Kyle Altuner, and it was like Josiah Thompson. I think is the only 4 that I'm aware of that have offered so far in the 2024 class. So, yeah, and you're never going to see a Coach Heastand coach offensive line with like 25 offers out to offensive line. You're not often going to see that. Crazy like a Foskey. In the last 15 years in Notre Dame, who would win your did the most with least natural ability award? Who would be the greatest waste of ability award? I'm going to be honest with you, Ryan. For the first one, I'm hard pressed not to go with Tommy Rees.
Yeah, Tommy Rees is a good one. That's one immediate.
I mean, he's in the top 5 of Notre Dame records, and he's not that talented of a quarterback. And he would tell you that. Right. I mean, and I'd probably have to go with him. Because, I wouldn't go with Chris Fink because Chris Fink is an athletic dude. Like, Chris Fink is
he's like a 4.5 something.
Yeah, he ran a 4.57 at the combine. He was faster than 4.56. He was faster than Hunter Renfrow. I think he was an athletic, talented guy. I'd say probably Ian Book. Probably Tommy Rees is what I'm thinking.
Joe Schmidt. Is he popping your head?
He wasn't good. That's the problem.
I mean, he was good that one year. He was decent.
Solid until he got hurt. He was a solid player until he got hurt. Who did the greatest waste of ability award? I don't know if I want to answer that one because it's kind of mean.
Negative.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to answer that one in such a public form. I might be more willing to answer that on the board.
Yeah, we could do that. Or I was going to say maybe we could rephrase it to say like a guy that you thought could have a higher upside, but I think
Deshaun Watson left a lot.
Deshaun Kaiser.
Left Deshaun Watson. He only won one title. What a bum.
Right.
Deshaun Kaiser, to me, should have been so much better than he was. But then there's guys like, like I said, Josh Barajas. I thought was him. He didn't do anything.
Max Redfield was one for me.
Yeah, but he was at least still a good player. He just
I thought he was going to be. I thought he was going to be like. I mean, obviously they're different players than like Kyle Hamilton, but I thought he was going to be like Kyle Hamilton light. I thought he was going to be that dude.
I get that. Here's an interesting question, Ryan. John F., do either of you guys plan to play the new NCAA game when it comes out? Curious to see if ND will be in it or if they will continue their holdout. They'd be stupid to continue to hold out. That would be so dumb, number one. But not only will I play it, I will go buy a new system in order just to play that game. Yes, I will play that game. I've already actually – it's funny. I was talking to this with Angela. When that game comes out, I will take a couple days off. I'm just telling you right now. I will have stories ready. And if breaking news comes, we'll report it, but I will not be working those 2 days. I'm just going to be completely honest with y'all. Nor will I be sleeping.
I still play NCAA 14 all the time. Yeah. So, yes, 100%. We'll be playing. It's the best game. It's way better than Madden, man. Yeah. It's way better than Madden.
Now, here's the question, Ryan. Do you play it? Like, do you play games? Like, do you play the whole season? Like, do you play each game?
So, this is what I do. I take over a franchise. I build it up for 4 years, right? I redshirt the first year. I get my whole team, and it's my team, and then I play that final season when they're all like redshirt seniors or seniors. Yeah, then I play that whole season.
I will only play big games. Like, that's it. Like, I'll only play big games because I love the dynasty mode. I love doing the recruiting and the training and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'll do all I'll play all the training. You remember that? Like the drills and stuff. I would do that, but I didn't play many games. It's just the coach in me, right? Like I enjoy the it's like one time I got really sick. It was like, gosh, it was like 2010 or 11. We just moved here. I got really sick. Like I was sick a whole week. And so Angela went and bought me an EA Sports like NFL GM game. I loved it. Right. I mean, it's so much fun because it's just, you're just the GM. There were some quirks with it that I didn't like, but like the premise of it was a lot of fun. Here's something I want to address, Ryan, which I think Georgia is from nothing personal. Georgia's proof that you can win a championship with a 3-star quarterback and 2 of the opponent's best offensive players injured. Look, I get what you're saying, and I don't know if this is something somebody else said. Somebody talking about Stetson Bennett, but the reality is Georgia's an anomaly. It's like Bama's won titles with mediocre quarterbacks. I mean, they won a title somewhat recently with the playoff era with Jacob Coker. But it's different. You can't. Those teams are the anomaly. I mean, because number one, they're recruiting it in a different way than most teams are. They play the game in a different manner. And let's be honest, the only time Georgia's, won a title is playing they want a rematch, right? I mean, and a bunch of guys got injured. So I don't know if I would say. I think there might be a little sarcasm in there, with the injury comment. But I never like using the outliers as the reason to prove something. It's
exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't use the exception to define the rule, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of that action. Let's get to a few more questions here before we got to get out of here. John A1, do you believe the 2022 Notre Dame receiver room is as talented as the 2021 Baylor room? Do you believe Chancey Stuckey would perform better at Notre Dame than he did at Baylor? I want to get your opinion on that because I have a strong take on that.
I think it's more talented than 2021. I mean,
than Baylor 2021.
Yeah, the Baylor's 2021. I mean, because you had the Tyquan Thornton kid who ended up going second round, but he was overdrafted. Everybody knows that by the Patriots. I mean, he's a really fast, athletic kid who had a good season. There's no doubt. But I would say long term, if him versus a Lorenzo Styles hit their ceiling, I would say Lorenzo Styles is just a better football player. And I think that 2022, he might even be a better version. I truly think that it could happen that quickly. So, I mean, besides that, you have Tyquan Thornton and then RJ Sneed's a solid player. I mean, but he's nothing special type of dude. So yeah, I think that there's definitely more talent in the Notre Dame receiving room. I don't even think it's actually that close.
Agreed.
To be honest.
I think overall Notre Dame has more talent. Where I think the difference is Baylor had a lot more experience. I mean, Tyquan Thornton had been a starter for 2 years. I mean, he had like 800 receiving yards like 2 years before that. What's the other kid's name? RJ Sneed, right? It was the other kid's name. He had played a bunch of football. So I think experience-wise, Baylor has the advantage, but talent-wise, in depth, their third receiver was an Ivy League walk-on, right? I mean, he's not seen the field at Notre Dame. So talent-wise, no. Yeah. Talent-wise, it's better. It's just it's inexperience combined with an overall lack of depth, I think is the issue. So yeah, that's kind of my stance on that one, Ryan. All right, let's get to here. We've got Tommy Guns. Based on what you just said about Ohio State, if Notre Dame wins September 3rd, would you rather win the first game with a guaranteed rematch in the first round of the playoff or lose week 1 in a rematch in the championship? I'd take the latter. I always want to be the team that lost a rematch. I never want to be in a situation you got to beat a team twice. I can't think of that ever working out in a championship format. The only time I remember it working out at all was Oklahoma beat TCU in a rematch like twice for a Big 12 title in the last 5 or 6 years. There was a year, but that TCU team wasn't anywhere in the same ballpark as what Oklahoma was. I think it was the Kyler Murray year. No, it was it 17? It was somewhat recently they beat TCU twice to win the Big 12 title. But you go back to like 2011, LSU beats Bama at Bama and has to play them again in a neutral field and then loses convincingly. Well, of course they were going to lose convincingly. You're not going to beat Bama twice.
It's very hard to beat a team twice a year. Very hard. Even on the NFL level, like you usually see teams split in the division. Like you don't usually see teams sweep that
Unless teams like really bad. If you're talking about two good teams.
Exactly.
Didn't the Bills beat the Chiefs during the regular season this year? Or did the Chiefs beat them twice?
I can't remember.
But I mean but you are correct. I mean, I'm trying to think of some other situations where there were rematches of those situations. But yeah, like what was it the year that Florida beat Florida State to win the national championship under Spurrier? They got pounded by Florida State in the regular season. I mean, I didn't like I think Andre Wadsworth was the best Florida State, but they punished Andy Warfel. Absolutely punished Andy Warfel in that game. But then they got a rematch and Florida won, right? I mean, so that's kind of I was correct. Buffalo beat Kansas City 38-20 in the regular season. And then
they beat them firmly. That's nice. Yeah.
Right. The interesting thing is Cincinnati beat Kansas City twice this year.
That's crazy.
And pretty close, but I think part of it is because it was kind of close. It's like less than a month apart. It's 34-31 and then the overtime game. I think that was more about Cincinnati just choking that game away than it was anything. I mean, Kansas City choking that game away than it was anything.
They sure did, man.
Here's an interesting one, Ryan. Jay Montalbano, if you could have Keon Keeley, Caleb Downs, and Drake Bowen, or just Dante Moore, who are you taking? Neither. I know where you're going with this one, but I don't want to have to choose that. You need both. If I could only have one of those, I'm taking the 3 great players over 1 great player. I mean, I'm going with that because, again, that's the Georgia model, right? Like you can win with a okay quarterback if, CJ Carr is not exactly a consolation prize. He's
pretty
a good player.
Exactly.
Steve Angeli, I would take Steve Angeli coming out of high school than I would take Stetson Bennett coming out of high school, right? You've got Tyler Buckner still and all that, but I mean, I'm still taking the 3 great players. I mean, I'm going to try to get better at not taking the total cop out, with I want both and respect the question. I would take the 3 studs over the 1 stud, but the nice thing is they don't have to make that. They don't have to make that exception. But I get the point of the question, but give me 3 studs that make sure that you can't score on me, and I don't need an elite quarterback. Now, the way that you build a program that's competing for titles year after year after year is you do both, right? And that's what we're going to find out. Is Georgia a one-year wonder like LSU? We're just kind of all went together at the right time, or are they building a program? I tend towards the former. We'll find out if that's true or not. Tyler Bedwell, in your opinion, what happened with Duvall Kamara's Notre Dame career? It's funny when this question came up, and I think looking at the timing of this question, I think this question came up before you mentioned his name.
Before I slipped?
I think so. In your opinion, what happened with Duvall Kamara's Notre Dame career? He came as a 5-star and came in with a lot of hype, but he never really became anything. Was it personal issues or just Weiss's poor development? So he actually had a good freshman year. He led the team in receiving as a true freshman, I believe, or receiving yards, I believe. Maybe John Carlson had more catches, but Duvall might have had more yards. I'm going to look that up here real quick. Notre Dame 2007 football stats. John Carlson led the team in catches with 40 and yards at 372. Duvall was second. He led the team in receiving touchdowns. Duvall had 32 catches for 357 yards and 4 touchdowns as a freshman in 11 games. So, Brian, do you have enough recollection of that tenure to offer an answer? I can certainly give my thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think your thoughts would be a little more in depth. Obviously, I remember that I was really excited about him when he was a true freshman, and then I just didn't hear much from him after that type of situation.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. I don't know if Duvall, from what I've been told, was always the most focused kid. I think that's part of it. I think Rob Ianello was a horrible receivers coach. He had no clue how to coach. He was a good recruiter, but I've heard some horror stories about him as a receivers coach. And Duvall was a kid that needed to be coached. I mean, he was not getting at it. He's from Hoboken, right? Didn't he play at Hoboken? He was just a big, tall, raw kid. And I think the other part of it too is Notre Dame's strength program at the time was like there was all this talk made of how when Charlie came in, guys got in better shape because Mo Stovall got in better shape. That was his exception. I thought too many guys kind of got too bulky. That Ruben Mendoza wasn't great at creating elusive guys, and I thought Duvall got stiffer. He was always a little bit tight, but I thought he had good vertical ability, good ball skills, but he wasn't taught how to play the game. I don't think he had necessarily the greatest work ethic, and I think the strength program hurt him because it made a tight kid even tighter. And but he ended up having a decent senior year. Not that he put up a bunch of numbers, but he had some big plays. He caught 11 passes for under 12 yards. Remember, he caught a touchdown pass in that USC game in 2010 that helped Notre Dame beat USC for the first time in like 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So he had his moments. He had his moments where he ended up he ended up having some impact on Notre Dame. There's no question about it. All right. Here we go. Last couple. I'm going to get to the last couple here. Here we go. If you could build a receiving core out of the Irish receivers from the last 20 years for this year's team, who would it be? And could that group win a championship? Well, the latter answer is freaking heck yes. And it doesn't matter what combination you go with. Mine is my boundary receiver is Michael Floyd. My field receiver is probably Will Fuller.
We're going to pick the same team, aren't we?
Yeah, and my slot receiver is, last 20 years, so that takes us back to 2002. So thinking about that, I'd probably put Samaj in the slot.
Really? Okay, I put Golden Tate in the slot.
Oh, Golden Tate.
Team,
yep.
Golden Tate
we're there. I'm with you.
Nope.
I'm with you.
That's my team.
Nope.
It's mine.
Nope.
You can't have it anymore.
I'm with you. Forgot about Golden. How did I forget about Golden Tate? No, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. But again, if I take Samaj and you take Golden, I think we're both realizing we're accomplishing the same thing.
Absolutely.
Right? I got my 100 catch guy in the boundary who can just win a one-on-one against anybody. I got my 4-3-2 guy to the field, right? Who can also play in the slot, do some different things there. And then whether you go with Golden Tate or Jeff Samardzija, I got another high volume guy that can make big plays after the catch there. Because that's the thing. The reason I would go with Samardzija because he can work the middle of the field. His lack of speed doesn't become as big of a factor there. He knew how to get open, and he was pretty good after the catch. He was surprisingly good after the catch. Two of the biggest plays of his career, he had 2 game-winning touchdowns. 1 game-winning touchdown against UCLA, which was after the catch, and then he had a big touchdown against Michigan State that got them back in that game. Then Terrell Lambert ended up having the game-winning touchdown on a pick 6, but Samardzija had that slant. If you remember, he caught it in the range, stopped. The guy ran past him. He cut back outside and takes it in for a touchdown. It was after the catch. He was pretty decent after the catch.
I love Samardzija. I love Samardzija.
Yeah, that would be Samardzija or Tate. Either one, and I'm not losing to anyone. And I'd either have Tyler Eifert or Michael Mayer at tight end, depending on what Michael Mayer does this year. I'd still take Tyler Eifert now. Right now, Tyler Eifert in 2011 and 12 was better than what Michael Mayer is right now, I think Michael Mayer as a junior could end up being better.
What about if you cheated a little bit, you could put Tyler Eifert as your big slot?
I'd still do that even with my 11 personnel. I mean, that's the thing is
There
could be a play where I'm going to put Michael Floyd to the field, have Will Fuller and Golden Tate or some margin, not 2 and 3, and I got Tyler Eifert as my boundary, right? I mean, yeah, you could do a lot of fun things with them. Here's a question: of the last 20 years since 2002, who's your running back on that team? Who's your starting running back on that team from 2002 to now? Mine's easy.
Julius Jones.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good answer. Good answer. That helps make up for the Frostburg State thing from earlier. This is going to have to be the last one. We do have to get going here. We are not Marshall. This is kind of going along the same lines that we've talked about. We are not Marshall. Brian Vince, we'll insert Ryan for Vince. Favorite players by decade, 1980s to now. So let's go one offense, one defense. 1980s is easy for me. It's Tony Rice. My fondest memories of Rocket are more of 90 from the 90 season. So I kind of put him into the 90s a little bit. But Tony Rice, 80s on offense, defensively, and then 80s, it's probably Todd Light. It's Todd Light.
Tim Brown offense.
Defense. I never really saw Tim Brown play. That was a little before my time.
I mean, yeah, it's before my time too. But
all of it
exists. Right. Yeah, all of it is. The 80s. I don't know the 80s.
Tony Rice has a ring. That's kind of why I go with it. And he was a quarterback, and I was a quarterback.
That's fair. I
just was a big fan of Todd Light as a player.
Defense. I'm gonna go with a personal touch here. I got a DM this morning from Mike Goolsby, so I'll go Mike Goolsby in the 80s.
Mike Goolsby played in the 2000s.
Wait, not Goolsby. Who am I thinking of? Who's the linebacker in the 80s? I am
Michael Stonebreaker.
Stonebreaker. Yes, okay. Yes. The greatest last name of all time for a linebacker. Yes, Michael Stonebreaker.
There you go. 1990s. Who's your guy in the 1990s?
I'll go Bettis on offense. Defensively,
I'm going BY. I'm going BY on defense.
Bryant Young. Yeah.
He was my favorite guy. Now my favorite player of the 90s was I'd probably have to go with, this is going to sound a little weird. My favorite Notre Dame player of the 90s was probably Jarius Jackson. Favorite. Jerome Bettis was the best, but he was part of a great backfield, and it's him and Reggie I kind of put them together, but I loved watching Jarius Jackson play. And I felt bad for him because he always played on such bad teams. But he'd probably my guy in the 90s. 2000s, favorite player of the 2000s, Ryan, for me, it's easy. It's Brady Quinn on offense. There's little doubt about that. And probably go Justin Tuck on defense.
My offense would probably be, I love Jeff Samardzija, so I'll go Jeff Samardzija, and then defensively I'll go Tom Zibikowski.
I knew you were going to go there.
I love Tom Zibikowski, man. He was so much fun.
He was a good kid. He was good. I actually worked with him at a Bowling Green camp when he was in high school. When Urban Meyer was the head coach at Bowling Green, he attended one of their camps. He's a good kid.
Nice. Yeah.
2010s. All right, who's your favorite player in the 2010s? Offense and defense.
Quentin Nelson.
It's a little tougher because I kind of covered the team then. So it's like I look at him a little differently, like less as a fan than I did in like the 90s and 2000s, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's a little bit tougher.
I would say that offensively it's Quentin Nelson. Yeah. Defensively, Monty Teo.
It's hard. It's challenging to pick between Will Fuller and Quentin Nelson because they're both so dominant. So I'm gonna cheat and take both of them. Defensively,
you can't do that.
I can. What? See that right up there, right? That right up there. Who owns that, right? I do. So I'm going to cheat and take both of them. That's why I let you go first. Sucker. All right, 19 and 2010s on defense. Manti's a good one. Manti Te'o's a good one. He was probably the best. Jalen Smith. I'm probably favorite, right? Not best, because Sean and I were having this conversation the other day, and Notre Dame is Jalen was the best player. Jalen was the most talented, but Brian Van Gorder kept him from being the best. And just look at the production. Manti had way more production than Jalen did. Jalen was a tremendous player, and if Jalen would have got to play with if Jalen would have got the same kind of coaching Manti got, it's a no-brainer. It wouldn't even be close. But my favorite player of the 2010s is probably It's probably Jalen and Harrison Smith are probably my two favorites, but I'd probably have to go with Jalen because Jalen just did things on the football field that you just don't see. I haven't seen it before. I haven't seen it since. I mean, the tackle for loss he had against Michigan in 2014 was just stupid. I was just like, you're not supposed to be able to make that play, especially that deep in the backfield. Like that's not fair. Jalen's probably my favorite.
Yeah, no, Jalen's a great one. I have a soft spot for Aloha Gilman as well.
Yeah,
so
and he's
throw him out there.
Kid.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he was fun to watch. He was that kid that just Alohi thought, like if Alohi didn't have the confidence he had, he never plays in the NFL. Like he has supreme confidence beyond maybe than what he should, which is why I love the kid and why he's been successful. But I think he was also a really needed attitude piece for that 2018 team. Like you're talking about swagger. You think about that 2018 team, who on that defense had swagger outside of him? I think he kind of forced that swagger onto him, and Jalen Elliott were both really confident kids. I think they kind of their swagger then I think kind of bled into everybody else.
His forced fumble against Pinckney against Vanderbilt, that just sticks in my mind so much, man. Yeah. It was such a great play. He had
a huge breakup in the end zone against Michigan that people forget when it was getting close to being a touchdown game, and he had a big play. Now it's kind of how Alohi was when a play needed to be made. You just kind of felt like Alohi was going to make it, but yeah, that play against Vanderbilt was insane. So I think that's going to do it. I want to just make sure I got to all the super chats. We actually have to get rolling here. But this has been a fun show. There's so many great questions we're not able to get to right now. Mace AK, the intel is on fire right now, so everyone join the message board. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and give a 5-star review. And as always, go Irish. Thanks everybody so much for being with us today. You guys did exactly what I knew you were going to do, which is you brought great questions, and you guys made this show be excellent. So thank you all so very much. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.